Hey guys, tonight we're doing something that sounds deeply romantic until you think about it for longer than about 6 seconds. We're climbing aboard a stagecoach in the American West in the winter of 1881, settling underneath a heavy robe, watching snow gather over the plains, and attempting to sleep while several thousand pounds of wood, iron, leather, luggage, mail, strangers, and deeply opinionated horses bounce through the darkness beneath you. From a distance, it is magnificent. Moonlight on the snow, frost on the coach roof, 4 or 6 horses steaming in the cold, a lantern glowing outside a lonely stage station while the driver pulls his coat tighter and disappears into the night. Inside the coach, however, your left knee belongs to a mining salesman from Ohio. Somebody's carpet bag is resting on your ankle. The man opposite has been asleep with his mouth open for 40 minutes. And every pothole rearranges the entire passenger compartment like somebody shaking a biscuit tin. Tonight we're heading from the railroad town of Sidney, Nebraska, toward Deadwood in Dakota Territory, one of the routes still very much dependent on stage travel in 1881. Railroads have already transformed enormous parts of America, so you are not crossing the entire continent by coach like some exhausted traveller from 20 years earlier. You have done the civilized thing. You took the train as far as civilization currently extends. Civilization has now handed you to some horses, and from here, you still have hundreds of miles to go. Thank you, as always, to everyone who keeps sending in these wonderfully specific historical suggestions. You have somehow turned this channel into a place where grown adults voluntarily spend their evenings asking questions like, yes, but exactly how uncomfortable was 19th century transportation? And I genuinely wouldn't have it any other way. If you're enjoying the channel, please like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually want to. No pressure. It helps enormously, and I appreciate every single one of you who does. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Someone is inevitably hearing this at 2 in the morning while making a decision tomorrow's version of themselves will resent. And if you'd rather listen without keeping YouTube open, we're also on Spotify. The link is down in the description. Now dim the lights. Put a fan on if you've got one. Pull the blanket up. Get your pillow into precisely the position that satisfies you, knowing that in about 5 minutes you're going to become intensely grateful that your pillow is not a sack of federal mail. Because tonight we're going to find out what winter travel by stagecoach actually felt like. How do you sleep sitting upright while the road is actively trying to throw you into another person? How warm is a buffalo robe when the outside temperature has stopped behaving responsibly? What happens when you finally drift off and the horses are changed 10 miles later? Where do you put your legs when 8 other people have also brought legs? What do you eat at a stage station in the middle of nowhere? What happens when the road disappears beneath snow? Can the coach simply get stuck? Does anybody stop because you're tired? What if you need the toilet at midnight? What if the person beside you snores? What if you snore? What if you wake up using a stranger as a pillow, and neither of you possesses the emotional vocabulary required to discuss it? And perhaps most importantly, what did the word sleep mean to people who considered being repeatedly launched into a mailbag a perfectly acceptable form of overnight transportation? Congratulations. You've just stepped off a Union Pacific train in Sidney, Nebraska. The year is 1881. The Black Hills Gold Rush has transformed Deadwood from an illegal mining camp into a rough, rapidly developing frontier town. The railroad has brought you wonderfully far west, but it does not yet go where you are going. Waiting near the station is your next mode of transportation. A large horse-drawn coach with high wheels, leather suspension, curtains at the windows, baggage strapped wherever baggage can legally be persuaded to remain, and a driver who looks considerably less worried about the coming night than you think he should. Snow is beginning to fall. Deadwood is roughly 275 miles away. Your hotel room is several days in the future. Welcome aboard. Try not to require circulation in your feet. 1. The railroad ends, and your standards leave with it. Let's begin in Sidney. You have just stepped down from a Union Pacific train into western Nebraska, and for a few dangerous seconds you may actually feel optimistic. The railway has carried you hundreds of miles across the country with astonishing efficiency by the standards of 1881. You have had a roof over your head. You have had a seat. You have moved at a speed that would have seemed almost supernatural to your grandparents. Most importantly, the floor beneath you has generally remained horizontal. Enjoy that memory. You are about to discover how quickly transportation standards can collapse once somebody removes the rails. Sydney is a busy little railroad town, full of freight, travellers, animals, wagons, railway workers, merchants, soldiers passing through, and people whose clothing suggests they have already been outdoors considerably longer than you would like to be. Steam hangs around the platform. Coal smoke drifts through the cold air. Somewhere a locomotive hisses as if deeply relieved that your journey is no longer its responsibility. And waiting beyond the station is your stagecoach. It looks impressive from a distance. This is important because almost everything about stagecoach travel looks better from a distance. The coach is tall, heavy, and solidly built, with large wooden wheels reinforced with iron tyres. Its body is suspended on enormous leather thoroughbraces, designed to absorb the punishment of rough roads. There are boots for baggage at the front and rear, room on top for additional luggage, and a driver's seat perched above everything, with precisely enough protection from the weather to suggest that nobody designing it expected winter to happen. A team of horses stands in front, breathing white clouds into the air. They look powerful. They also look as though they know something you don't. Your ticket north will take you toward Deadwood in Dakota Territory, roughly 275 miles away. Under favourable conditions, the journey can be made in several days. Winter, however, has never shown much respect for schedules. The stage line has stations spaced along the route where teams can be changed, passengers fed, mail transferred, and everyone reminded that comfort is a temporary privilege. You look around for the waiting room. There isn't one. You look for someone handling luggage carefully. There is a man handling luggage. Carefully may be too ambitious. Your trunk is lifted, carried toward the coach, and secured with the calm efficiency of people who have spent years tying other people's possessions to moving vehicles. You watch everything you own disappear beneath canvas and rope. This is apparently fine. Around you, other passengers are doing the same thing. A businessman carries a small case. Someone has a carpet bag. Another traveller has bundled himself into a heavy overcoat before the journey has even begun, which you initially interpret as excessive preparation until a gust of Nebraska wind reaches your face and immediately changes your opinion. It is cold in the direct, uncomplicated way that only open country can be cold. There are no buildings close enough to block the wind once you leave town. No heated stations every 20 miles. No cafe waiting beside the road. Once the stage heads north, warmth will become something you carry on your body or briefly borrow from a stopping place. This is the moment the journey changes character. The railway belonged to the industrial age. Steel rails, telegraph wires, timetables, engines burning coal and pulling entire communities' worth of passengers westward. The stagecoach belongs to something older. Horses, mud, snow, leather, human judgment, and roads that occasionally become theoretical. You climb aboard because there is nothing else to do. The doorway is narrower than expected. The interior is smaller than expected. The seat is harder than expected. Another passenger shifts his knees to let you pass, revealing that the available legroom has already been distributed among people who arrived before you. You sit. Your coat bunches behind your back. Your knees meet somebody else's. The door closes. Outside, the railway station remains wonderfully motionless. For one final moment, you can hear the locomotive behind you. Then the driver gathers the reins. The horses lean forward. The coach moves. And just like that, the most advanced transportation system in America has delivered you directly into a wooden box being dragged towards South Dakota by animals. Progress is rarely a straight line. 2. The coach looks smaller once everybody arrives. Let's talk about the stagecoach itself. From outside, it looks reassuringly substantial. A Concorde coach is a handsome piece of 19th-century engineering, tall on the road, brightly painted when new, with broad wooden wheels, iron fittings, leather curtains, and a curved body designed to survive punishment that would cause a modern family car to quietly invalidate its own warranty. You look at it and think, yes, that seems large enough. Then the passengers arrive. One person climbs inside wearing a heavy winter coat, then another appears with a carpet bag. Then a woman gathers several layers of skirt and settles onto the opposite seat. Another man follows carrying a small case. Someone else squeezes through the doorway behind him. With every new arrival, the coach seems to shrink. Nothing about the vehicle has physically changed. You understand this intellectually, yet the interior now appears to be losing approximately 6 inches of width every 30 seconds. A typical Concorde coach could carry 9 passengers inside when fully loaded, 3 across each of its 3 bench seats. The front and rear benches faced inward, while a middle bench could be suspended between them. 9 adults. This number was evidently determined during a period when Americans were much less emotionally attached to elbows. The seats themselves are upholstered, which sounds luxurious until you sit on one. They offer considerably more comfort than a bare plank, but nobody involved in their construction has spent much time wondering what your lower back will feel like after 12 consecutive hours. The interior is narrow enough that passengers sitting opposite one another must negotiate their legs immediately. Your knees meet another person's knees. There is nowhere else for either set to go. You move slightly left. He moves slightly right. A third passenger enters and renders the entire negotiation irrelevant. Now, everybody's knees belong to the coach. Winter clothing makes everything worse. Heavy wool coats, scarves, gloves, layered dresses, boots, blankets, and fur or buffalo robes all occupy space before the human beings inside them have even begun making demands. A person who might occupy 18 inches of bench in July suddenly requires the territorial ambitions of a small European kingdom, and you cannot simply remove your coat. Outside, the temperature is low enough that keeping it on is not a matter of style. It is a matter of continuing to enjoy fingers. The coach does have windows, or at least openings fitted with leather or fabric curtains that can be raised in pleasant weather and closed when the planes begin sending winter directly into your face. Glass windows were not something you could depend upon in an ordinary Western stagecoach, so the curtains come down. The interior grows dim. Now you are sitting extremely close to 8 strangers inside a dark wooden compartment, while horses prepare to drag all of you into the countryside. This would normally be the opening scene of a deeply concerning documentary. Above your head, luggage is being secured to the roof. More baggage may be stowed in the front and rear boots. Mail bags and express parcels have to fit somewhere too, because the coach is not merely carrying people, it is carrying business. Letters, newspapers, packages, money, possibly valuables moving between towns. And apparently your knees, although their ownership remains disputed. The body of the coach hangs on thick leather thoroughbraces rather than the sort of steel suspension you would recognize. These enormous leather straps allow the coach body to sway and absorb some of the violence produced by primitive roads. This is clever engineering. It does not mean the ride is smooth. It means the violence arrives in a more sophisticated form. Instead of merely bouncing vertically, you can sway sideways as well. You will discover this later. For now, everyone is still arranging themselves. A carpet bag is pushed beneath a seat. Someone adjusts a blanket. A passenger removes his hat, realizes there is nowhere useful to put it, and puts it back on. The man beside you settles his shoulder against yours with the quiet confidence of someone who understands that neither of you has an alternative. Nobody apologizes. There is no point. You glance toward the door and calculate whether you could still change your mind. Technically, yes. Practically, your luggage is already tied to the roof, and Deadwood is 275 miles north. The final passenger climbs aboard. The door shuts. 9 people look at one another. And the coach that seemed enormous from the railway platform now feels like someone has invited an entire dinner party to spend the weekend inside a cupboard. You haven't even moved yet. 3. Choosing a seat becomes your first strategic decision. It's time to sit down. This sounds simple because sitting is normally one of the least complicated things you do. You identify a chair, lower yourself toward it, and the matter is considered resolved. Inside a stagecoach in the winter of 1881, however, choosing where to sit is a decision with consequences that may follow you for the next several hundred miles. The interior gives you several possibilities, none of them especially convincing. The seats at the front and rear face one another. A middle bench may be suspended between them, allowing the coach to accommodate still more passengers because apparently someone looked at the available space and decided the problem was insufficient humanity. You immediately notice the corner. The corner has a wall. A wall means somewhere to rest your shoulder. More importantly, it means somewhere to put your head once darkness arrives, and your neck begins negotiating separately for better working conditions. So naturally, everyone wants the corner. Experienced travellers understand this. They board quickly. They settle without unnecessary discussion. They have seen what happens to the person left sitting in the middle. You have not. You hesitate for several seconds, which is long enough for a man in a thick overcoat to claim one corner and a woman carrying a carpet bag to occupy another. You choose the remaining space beside the coach wall and feel reasonably pleased with yourself. Then the passenger opposite sits down. His knees arrive first. There is very little distance between opposing benches, especially once everyone is wearing winter clothing. Your legs, therefore, cannot simply extend forward in the civilized manner to which they have become accustomed. His knees occupy that territory. Your knees also require territory. A negotiation begins. You angle one leg slightly to the left. He shifts his right leg. You move the other. He adjusts again. For several moments, the two of you perform a silent geometric exercise until every knee has found somewhere to exist. Then another passenger climbs aboard and destroys the entire arrangement. Now boots overlap. One foot disappears beneath the opposite seat. Someone's carpet bag is pushed underneath your legs. A heavy skirt fills the space near the door. You discover that stagecoach seating is less like sitting in a vehicle and more like packing a cupboard while several of the objects continue having opinions. There is another problem with your carefully selected corner. Every advantage has a price. If you sit against the wall, you have support for sleeping, but when the coach stops, everyone between you and the door becomes part of the escape procedure. You cannot simply stand up and leave. There is nowhere to stand. You must wait while passengers unfold themselves one at a time, collecting hats, gloves, blankets, bags, and portions of their dignity before climbing down. The person nearest the door enjoys easy access to the outside. Unfortunately, the person nearest the door also receives every blast of winter air whenever it opens. At a relay station in daylight, this is inconvenient. At 2 a.m, when the temperature has fallen and you have finally achieved a small pocket of warmth beneath a robe, the opening door feels like someone has removed one wall of the building. The middle seat has its own disadvantages. There is nothing substantial behind your head. Once sleep comes, your chin falls forward, your head rolls sideways, or you gradually lean onto another passenger until either they object or both of you decide that dignity is less important than unconsciousness. This is why stagecoach etiquette becomes increasingly flexible after midnight. During the afternoon, you are strangers. By dawn, someone may be asleep against your shoulder while your boot is trapped beneath his luggage. Nobody discusses it. Everyone understands that the road has temporarily suspended normal society. You settle deeper into your chosen place. Your shoulder presses against the coach side. Your boots have found a narrow strip of floor. Your coat is trapped behind you in a way you already know will become irritating. The man opposite gives you a polite nod. You return it. Neither of you knows that before morning you will have spent several hours accidentally kicking one another every time the coach hits a rut. For now, though, you have a seat. In stagecoach travel, this counts as success. Comfort would be showing off. 4. Your luggage has better accommodation than you do. Before departure, let's discuss baggage, because the coach company has opinions about how much of your life is permitted to accompany you. Stagecoaches carry passengers, express freight, mail, and luggage, all of which compete for finite room. Bags may be strapped above, stored in the boots at the front or rear, wedged wherever practical, and tied down with the solemn expectation that knots will continue respecting civilization after dark. What you keep with you must therefore be chosen carefully. A small bag, perhaps food, gloves, a blanket, whatever valuables you do not wish to see bouncing cheerfully toward Wyoming without you. You watch your trunk disappear beneath a canvas covering on the roof and experience the peculiar 19th-century confidence of knowing that nearly everything you own is being secured outdoors with rope. There are baggage allowances, of course, because even the frontier eventually discovers paperwork. Stage companies generally limit how much personal baggage can accompany each passenger without additional charge. Anything beyond the allowance may cost extra, assuming there is room for it at all. This creates an immediate conflict between what you believe you need for several days of winter travel and what the coach would prefer you to need, which is apparently one coat and a positive attitude. You have packed sensibly, at least you thought you had. A change of clothes, toiletries, perhaps extra stockings or socks, a small supply of food, letters, a book, personal items. Then you watch the stage employee lift your trunk and suddenly become aware that every unnecessary object inside it is now being judged by a man who has to hoist the thing above his shoulders. He says nothing. This is worse. The larger pieces are arranged where they can be carried without interfering with passengers or unbalancing the coach. The front and rear compartments, commonly called boots, provide enclosed or semi-enclosed storage. More luggage can be secured on top beneath canvas. The roof looks alarmingly far from the ground. Your trunk is placed there. A second bag joins it, then another. Ropes are pulled tight. Canvas is drawn across the load. Someone gives the whole arrangement a testing tug. Apparently this is the security system. You begin imagining every rut between Sydney and Deadwood. The baggage handler has already stopped imagining them because he has seen them. Inside the coach, smaller belongings become another problem. You want your gloves nearby because removing them permanently would be foolish. You want your blanket. You want perhaps a flask or food packet. You want whatever papers or money you are carrying kept close to your body. You may also want a book, although this ambition will survive approximately 15 minutes once the road begins moving beneath you. There are no overhead bins. There is no space beneath the seats specifically designed for your convenience. There is simply whatever gap remains after everyone else's boots have arrived. A carpet bag gets pushed under the bench. Your smaller case is wedged beside it. Someone places a bundle near the door and is immediately told it cannot stay there. Everything inside a stagecoach must be secured or controlled because anything loose will eventually become airborne. This includes luggage. This includes hats. This may eventually include you. Then there is the mail. The stage is not merely transporting travellers. It is part of the communication system tying distant towns to the railroad and therefore to the rest of the country. Mail sacks, express parcels, newspapers, business documents, and sometimes valuable shipments all need space. The coach, therefore, has priorities, and you are only one of them. There is something humbling about realizing a sack of letters addressed to Deadwood may have a more clearly designated place aboard the vehicle than your own legs. You glance once more at the roof. Your trunk sits beneath canvas, firmly tied down, enjoying fresh air and nobody else's knees. Meanwhile, you will spend the next several hours folded into a wooden compartment beside strangers. You have paid for the privilege. The trunk has not. Already, it has negotiated the better deal. 5. You are riding toward a complicated piece of history. Before the horses move, it is worth understanding where you're actually going. Deadwood exists because thousands of prospectors flooded into the Black Hills after gold discoveries in the 1870s. Despite the United States having recognized the Black Hills as Lakota territory under the Treaty of Fort Laramie, by 1881, the war and seizure of those lands have already transformed the region. Roads, freight lines, stages, settlements, mines, military posts, and businesses now cross a landscape whose political history is neither simple nor particularly honourable. You, sitting inside your stagecoach and worrying about your toes, are participating in a huge movement of people and commerce into the Black Hills. History rarely feels like history while you're sitting inside it. Usually it feels like somebody needs to move their carpet bag. The Black Hills rise far to the north and west of the Great Plains around you, a forested island of pine-covered ridges and valleys that had long held deep spiritual and cultural importance for Lakota people. The United States had formally recognized Lakota control of the Black Hills in the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868. Then gold was discovered, and treaties have an unfortunate historical tendency to become much less impressive once valuable minerals appear underneath them. In 1874, an expedition led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer entered the Black Hills and confirmed reports of gold. Prospectors followed almost immediately. Technically, they were trespassing. Practically, there were soon so many of them that the federal government faced a choice between removing thousands of miners from land it had promised to protect or finding a way to keep the miners there. You can probably guess which option developed momentum. By 1875 and 1876, mining camps were appearing throughout the region. Deadwood grew in a narrow gulch after rich deposits were found along nearby creeks, and it grew quickly, very quickly. This is one of the strange things about frontier towns. A place can go from trees and water to saloons, hotels, stores, workshops, gambling rooms, newspapers, boarding houses, stables, and men arguing about property boundaries in an astonishingly short period of time. Apparently, civilization begins the moment somebody discovers gold and another person realizes the first person will need breakfast. The flood of settlers helped produce open conflict. The United States attempted to purchase the Black Hills. Lakota leaders resisted surrendering them. Tensions escalated into the Great Sioux War of 1876 and 1877. Names you already know belong to this story. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Custer, the Little Bighorn, but those famous names can make the history feel cleaner than it was. For people living through it, there was no neat chapter heading announcing that they had entered a major historical conflict. There were military columns, refugees, broken agreements, settlers moving north, Native communities being forced from hunting grounds. Buffalo herds already under enormous pressure. Telegraph reports arriving with incomplete information. Rumors spreading through towns. And commercial traffic continuing through all of it because somebody somewhere still needed flour delivered by Tuesday. By 1877, the United States had taken control of the Black Hills despite the earlier treaty guarantee. So when you board a stage for Deadwood in 1881, you are not travelling into untouched wilderness, nor are you entering some empty landscape waiting patiently for a town to appear. You are moving through territory transformed within just a few years by invasion, warfare, mining, government policy, and enormous economic pressure. The stage line itself is evidence of how quickly that transformation has happened. Deadwood now needs regular mail. It needs passengers. It needs machinery, food, clothing, tools, newspapers, business correspondence, replacement parts, and people arriving with absolutely no useful skills beyond the conviction that gold may be somewhere nearby. All of that has to move. The railroad brings goods and travellers as far as places like Sydney. Then the stage routes take over. You are sitting directly inside the machinery of expansion. The horses are harnessed, mail bags are loaded, freight is tied down. Nobody around you is giving a lecture about federal Indian policy. They are thinking about weather, road conditions, departure times, and whether the coffee at the next station will be drinkable. That is often how enormous historical changes happen, not with everyone pausing dramatically to acknowledge them, but with ordinary people buying tickets, hauling freight, opening businesses, making money, losing money, and continuing forward while the meaning of what they are doing becomes clearer much later. The driver climbs into his seat. The reins tighten. You settle against the coach wall. Deadwood waits somewhere beyond the winter plains, and underneath the adventure story is another story entirely. You are riding toward a gold town. You are also riding across the consequences of a broken promise. 6. The driver releases you into the evening. At last, you're moving. The driver gathers the reins above you, gives the team whatever small signal experienced drivers use when 6 horses already know perfectly well what is expected, and the coach begins to roll away from Sydney. For the first few minutes, it is genuinely wonderful. This is important to admit. The wheels turn over the frozen road with a steady wooden rumble. Hooves strike the ground in complicated rhythm. Harness chains jingle. Leather creaks. Behind you, the railway buildings begin to shrink, and ahead lies an enormous sweep of open country under the fading winter sky. The horses breathe white clouds. The driver sits high above the coach, bundled against the cold, reins passing through gloved hands. You lean toward the curtain and look outside. For one glorious moment, you understand every painting, story, and badly researched Western film that has ever convinced anyone that stagecoach travel was romantic. This is magnificent. You are heading into the American West. Then the left wheel drops into a rut. Your entire body leaves the seat. Not far, perhaps an inch or two. Enough. You land with considerably less dignity than you departed. The man opposite catches himself against the side of the coach. Someone's carpet bag shifts under the bench. A hat tilts forward. Nobody says anything because apparently this was not considered an event. The coach continues. You begin to realize that the driver has not failed to notice the rough ground. He simply knows there is nothing useful to be done about it. The horses settle into their pace, and Sydney gradually disappears behind you. There is something unsettling about watching the last substantial collection of buildings vanish in winter. The railroad was certainty. Tracks connected one place to another. Stations had clocks. Telegraph wires ran alongside the line. Trains had timetables, even when those timetables occasionally displayed an imaginative relationship with reality. The stage road feels different. Ahead, you can see tracks cut into the earth, perhaps hardened now by frost, perhaps softened elsewhere by snow or mud. The route exists because enough wagons and coaches have travelled it to create one. This is transportation by collective memory. You begin noticing the landscape more carefully. Low winter grass stretches outward beneath patches of snow. The sky seems larger now that the town is gone. Wind moves across the plains without encountering anything substantial enough to discourage it. Inside the coach, conversation continues for a while. People introduce themselves. Someone is travelling on business. Someone knows a man in Deadwood. Someone has heard that the weather farther north is worse. This information contributes nothing useful. You would have preferred to hear that winter has unexpectedly been cancelled. The driver calls to the team. The horses respond. Stage drivers develop an intimate understanding of their animals because the entire operation depends on it. A skilled driver needs to feel through the reins whether a horse is tiring, pulling unevenly, becoming frightened, or simply considering a private disagreement with another member of the team. You, meanwhile, are developing an intimate understanding of the wooden wall beside your shoulder. Another rut arrives. This time you are prepared. You brace your boots. The coach sways instead. Your shoulder hits the wall anyway. Excellent. You are learning. The light begins to soften toward evening. Gold near the horizon fades into blue and grey. The air visible through the small opening beside the curtain looks sharper somehow. Someone pulls the curtain lower. Another passenger adjusts the robe across their knees. The cheerful excitement of departure begins giving way to the practical work of travelling. You settle back. Sydney is gone now. There is no turning your head and seeing the railway. Only road behind you. Road ahead. The regular thunder of hooves. The rolling coach. The first edge of darkness spreading across Nebraska. And despite the cold, despite the cramped seat, despite the worrying discovery that the road appears to have been designed entirely from bumps, there is a quiet thrill in it. You are actually going somewhere. Then the coach hits another rut. Your teeth click together. Yes, you are definitely going somewhere. 7. The road is more of a strongly held opinion. Let's talk about the road. You may be imagining something recognizable as a road because language has led you badly astray. There is a route, certainly. People travel it. Wagons have passed this way. Stagecoaches have passed this way. Freight teams have passed this way often enough to press wheels into the ground and establish a general understanding that Sydney is behind you and Deadwood is somewhere ahead. Calling it a road simply gives the arrangement more confidence than it deserves. In places, you have 2 parallel wheel tracks stretching across open prairie. In others, repeated traffic has cut deep ruts into the earth. Where the ground is frozen, those ruts become hard ridges capable of throwing the coach sideways with extraordinary enthusiasm. Where snow covers them, you cannot see them at all. Where mud replaces snow during warmer weather, the same route can become a trench. There are no painted lines, no signs announcing a dangerous bend, no reflective markers, no neatly graded shoulder where the driver can pull over and reconsider his life. The driver has the route. He has landmarks. He has experience. And, critically, he has spent enough time on this road to know which sections are merely unpleasant and which sections have ambitions. You have none of this information. From inside the coach, the road communicates entirely through your spine. A shallow rut produces a quick jolt. A deeper one lifts one side of the coach and sends several passengers gently toward whoever has been unfortunate enough to sit downhill. A stone produces a hard knock beneath the wheel. A sequence of stones becomes percussion. You begin to identify terrain without seeing it. Smooth ground means conversation resumes. Rough ground means everyone stops speaking and concentrates on remaining approximately where they started. The Concorde coach has been designed for this. Its great leather thoroughbraces allow the body to sway above the axles, absorbing much of the punishment that would otherwise travel directly into the passengers. This is excellent engineering. Unfortunately, excellent engineering cannot repeal Nebraska. So the coach rolls, pitches, and swings. You brace one boot against the floor. The passenger opposite does the same. Both of you now look like men quietly attempting to prevent a wardrobe from escaping during an earthquake. The route also changes according to weather. Snow can hide ruts and stones. Wind can drift snow across open stretches. A freeze can harden yesterday's mud into a landscape of ridges and holes. A sudden thaw can return it to mud with very little warning. Creeks and low ground create their own difficulties. Bridges, where they exist, are useful enough to make you immediately suspicious of every place where one does not. And because this is 1881, nobody phones ahead to report conditions. The next station may know what the road behind it looks like because somebody recently came through. Beyond that, information becomes rumour. A driver heading south may stop long enough to warn yours about drifting snow farther north. A station keeper may mention that a crossing is difficult. A freighter may report that a wagon broke an axle several miles ahead. This is your traffic update. You begin to appreciate the driver more. He is not simply steering horses along a visible strip of earth. He is reading the landscape constantly. He watches the team. He watches the wheel tracks. He judges slopes. He remembers where water collects. He knows where the road divides because somebody once discovered that going around a hill was preferable to going over it. Sometimes multiple tracks wander across the prairie where travelers have chosen different versions of the same route. There may be no official correct one. There is simply the one that looks least likely to destroy the coach today. Another wheel strikes a frozen rut. The body swings hard to one side. Your shoulder meets the wall. The man beside you catches his hat. Somewhere above, the driver continues as though nothing unusual has happened. Because nothing has. This is the road. After another hour, you stop expecting smoothness. Your standards quietly adjust. A stretch of ground that merely rattles your teeth begins to feel luxurious. 10 uninterrupted seconds without being thrown sideways feels suspiciously civilized. And this is how the stage road wins. It does not improve. You simply become grateful when it briefly fails to be terrible. 8. The leather suspension turns travel into sailing. Now you discover the famous thorough braces. The Concorde coach does not ride on suspension in quite the way a modern passenger would expect. Instead of relying entirely on metal springs, the body of the coach is cradled between enormous strips of thick leather stretched lengthwise beneath it. These are the thorough braces. They are one of the reasons Concorde coaches earned such a strong reputation on difficult western roads. The leather flexes as the wheels strike ruts, rocks, frozen ridges, and every other objection the landscape has prepared for you. Without them, much of that force would travel directly upward, into the coach, then into the seat, then into you. So, you should be grateful. You are grateful. Briefly, because what the thorough braces remove in sharp vertical punishment, they replace with movement. A great deal of movement. The coach body hangs between the running gear almost like a cradle, which means that when one wheel rises over rough ground, the compartment does not merely jump. It sways, then it rolls back. Then the road changes underneath another wheel, and the coach begins moving in a completely different direction before your body has finished responding to the first one. The sensation is often compared to being aboard a boat. This sounds charming. It is not a yacht. You are sailing through Nebraska without water. At first, you fight the movement. Your muscles tighten every time the coach leans. You brace one hand against the side. Your boots press into the floor. When the body swings left, you lean right. When it swings right, you correct again. After 20 minutes of this, you realize you are personally attempting to stabilize several thousand pounds of moving stagecoach using your abdomen. This is not going to work. The experienced passengers are doing something different. They move with it. Their shoulders sway slightly as the coach rolls. They do not resist every motion because they know the motion will immediately reverse. You begin copying them. This helps. Not enough to make the journey comfortable, obviously. Let us remain historically responsible, but enough that you stop being surprised by every movement. The coach now develops a rhythm. Forward, sway, dip, roll, recover, rattle, repeat. Sometimes the road becomes temporarily smoother and the body settles into a slow rocking motion that is almost soothing. You can imagine falling asleep like this. Then a front wheel finds a hole. The entire coach plunges downward on one side. The leather stretches, the body swings dramatically, and the passenger beside you lands against your shoulder. Your theory about sleep is postponed. There is an extraordinary amount of noise involved. The leather creaks beneath you. The wooden body complains quietly at every twist. Iron fittings knock. Harness chains jingle outside. The wheels produce a constant rolling thunder that changes according to the surface beneath them. And above all of it comes the rhythmic beat of hooves. After a while, these separate sounds blend together. They become the background of the journey. Your ears stop identifying each creak individually, just as your body stops treating every sway as an emergency. This is perhaps the most remarkable thing about human beings. You normalize almost anything. An hour ago, being rocked sideways inside a wooden vehicle at speed would have seemed alarming. Now you are annoyed only when the rocking becomes unusually enthusiastic. There is also a strange advantage to the swaying. Because the coach does not strike every obstacle with rigid violence, passengers are spared some of the harshest impacts. The leather gives. The body floats slightly above the worst of the road. It is clever, durable, and remarkably well suited to the conditions. You begin appreciating why stage companies valued these coaches. Then the road tilts. The coach rolls toward one side. Everyone inside shifts together. For one silent second, 9 passengers lean at exactly the same angle. Then the thorough braces pull the body gently back toward level. Nobody comments. You are all learning the same lesson. The Concorde coach does not really travel over the road. It negotiates with it, and you are cargo on a very determined leather boat. 9. Winter comes straight through the curtains. The sun goes down, and almost immediately the journey changes. During daylight, the cold had been something you noticed. Now it becomes something you negotiate with. The temperature falls across the open plains, the last pale light drains from the western sky, and the warmth you brought aboard from Sydney begins quietly disappearing through every surface of the coach. You pull your coat tighter. This helps for approximately 4 minutes. The Concorde coach is built to survive brutal roads, not to provide the climate-controlled environment you have come to expect from anything involving a ticket. Its wooden body offers some protection from the wind, but the windows are not necessarily fitted with the reassuring sheets of glass you would prefer. Instead, there are curtains. Leather or heavy fabric can be lowered across the openings when weather turns unpleasant. And tonight, the weather has opinions. Someone reaches up and pulls the curtain fully down. The view disappears. The wind does not. Cold air continues to creep through the edges, finding gaps between curtain and frame with the persistence of a debt collector. A narrow stream reaches your cheek. You adjust the curtain. Now it reaches your neck. You adjust your scarf. The cold moves to your ankles. You begin to suspect that winter has entered the coach and is simply changing seats. Outside, the horses keep moving. Their bodies generate heat through constant work, and clouds of breath rise around their heads whenever you catch a glimpse through a shifting curtain. The driver is sitting above you in the open. This becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. You are inside complaining about a draft. He is essentially wearing a coat while personally meeting Nebraska. Drivers prepared for winter with heavy clothing, gloves, boots, scarves, blankets, and whatever additional layers experience had taught them were necessary. Sitting still for hours in exposed wind could be punishing even when the temperature itself was not extraordinary. The moving coach creates its own wind. The open prairie provides the rest. Inside, passengers begin making small adjustments. Collars rise. Gloves that had been removed earlier return. Scarves are pulled higher. Blankets unfold. Nobody announces that it is becoming cold because this would contribute nothing. Everyone has the same information. Your breath begins to show faintly when the coach slows. The wooden wall beside your shoulder feels colder now. You avoid pressing your face against it. This is wisdom gained through experience. The floor is worse. Cold settles low, and your boots are directly exposed to it. Your feet have less movement than the rest of you because there are several other people's feet occupying the same limited territory. You wiggle your toes. This is currently your heating system. There is no stove inside the passenger compartment. For obvious reasons, putting an open fire into a moving wooden coach full of wool clothing, leather, luggage, and frightened horses would have introduced a second problem. So, heat comes from clothing, blankets, heavy robes, and the people sitting around you. The passenger beside you suddenly becomes more useful. An hour ago, his shoulder pressing against yours felt intrusive. Now, it feels insulated. Human beings produce a surprising amount of warmth when packed together tightly enough, which means the same overcrowding you resented earlier is beginning to serve a practical purpose. Nobody moves farther apart. There is nowhere to move farther apart, but even if there were, you might reconsider. Outside the curtains, darkness deepens. The enormous landscape you had been admiring has vanished completely. Occasionally moonlight catches snow or pale ground through a narrow opening, but mostly there is nothing to see. You hear the road instead. Hooves, wheels, harness, the low creaking of the coach, the wind scraping softly against the curtain beside your head. You pull your coat closer again. Someone spreads another blanket across several pairs of knees. Nobody objects. You are gradually becoming a single communal heating project, and this is only early evening. The coldest part of the night is still hours away. You look at the curtain moving slightly in the wind and realize that it represents the entire technological barrier between you and winter. A piece of leather, a wooden wall, several layers of wool, and the body heat of a salesman from Ohio. Suddenly the salesman seems extremely important. 10. The buffalo robe becomes a major political issue. Let's talk about the robe. By now, the temperature inside the coach has fallen far enough that warmth is no longer a private matter. It has become a shared resource. Someone produces a heavy robe and spreads it across several laps. Immediately, everyone becomes interested. Heavy carriage robes were practical winter equipment in an age when the vehicle itself provided almost no heat. They could be made from wool, fur, or animal hides, and buffalo robes had long been especially valued on the plains for their warmth. A proper buffalo robe is substantial. The hide has been tanned with the thick winter hair left intact, creating something far heavier and warmer than the decorative throw you may be picturing from a modern furniture catalogue. This is not something you drape casually over one knee. This is insulation with a personality. The robe comes down across you. For the first time in an hour, your legs begin to feel genuinely protected. You could become emotional. Warmth slowly collects beneath it, trapped between heavy hide, coats, skirts, trousers, and the combined body heat of several deeply committed passengers. Everything improves. Then the man beside you pulls it toward himself, only slightly, perhaps 2 inches, but you notice. You were not watching the robe before. You are now. The woman opposite adjusts it across her knees. Another passenger lifts one corner to tuck it around his boots. The entire arrangement shifts. Cold air reaches your left leg. You look down. Your portion of the robe has decreased. Nobody has formally declared anything. Nevertheless, territorial expansion is underway. You tug it back, gently. Not enough to seem rude. Enough to restore the border. The passenger beside you responds 20 seconds later by adjusting his coat and somehow acquiring another inch. This is how wars begin. There are practical complications. If the robe hangs too far toward the floor, boots may trap it. If one passenger moves suddenly, everyone feels it. If someone gets out at a relay station, the entire system must be dismantled and reconstructed. And because the passengers are sitting close together, there is no neat division where one person's warmth ends and another's begins. You are all underneath the same piece of animal hide, collectively pretending this does not create obligations. The buffalo robe itself carries a larger story. By 1881, the enormous bison herds that had once covered much of the Great Plains are already being destroyed at extraordinary speed. Commercial hunting has intensified through the 1870s. Railroads make hides easier to ship east. Hunters kill vast numbers of animals, often taking hides and leaving much of the carcass behind. The destruction also has devastating consequences for plains nations whose food, material culture, trade, and ways of life were closely tied to the bison. So the warm robe stretched over your knees is not merely clever frontier equipment. It belongs to an economy changing the plains around you with frightening speed. You are not thinking about that at 9 o'clock tonight. You are thinking about your toes. This is one of history's less flattering habits. Enormous economic and environmental changes often enter ordinary life as useful objects. A robe, a railway ticket, a sack of flour, a new road. People use what is available because they are cold, hungry, travelling, working, or simply trying to get through the day. And tonight you are extremely cold, so you pull the robe higher. Someone on the opposite seat objects because this exposes his boots. A compromise is reached. The robe is lowered slightly. The man beside you quietly folds one edge beneath his thigh. You stare at him. He does not look at you. An experienced operator. By now, the passengers have developed an entire unspoken system. Nobody may pull suddenly. Corners must remain distributed. Anyone leaving the coach is responsible for lifting rather than dragging. Anyone returning must resume approximately the same position. No person may claim that they weren't using that bit because every bit is being used. There is no written constitution. There is enforcement. Another gust enters around the curtain. Every person beneath the robe instinctively moves closer together. The dispute ends immediately. This is the great achievement of winter. It makes cooperation remarkably attractive. 10 minutes later, your knees are warm. Your feet remain questionable, but there is hope. The coach rocks onward through the darkness while 6 adults guard one increasingly precious rectangle of warmth. You have known these people for only a few hours. You would not lend most of them money. But if anyone tries to take this robe away, you are prepared to defend them all. 11. Your feet become historical artifacts. It's your feet that go first. Your upper body is reasonably well defended. You have a heavy coat. Your scarf is pulled high. A buffalo robe or thick blanket lies across your lap. Several other passengers are packed close enough around you to produce a small but meaningful amount of shared warmth. Your feet, however, are down near the floor. This is where winter has established headquarters. At first, your toes are simply cold, not alarming. You flex them inside your boots and tell yourself everything is fine. Then they become colder. Then they begin to feel oddly separate from the rest of you, as though they have started a long administrative process to leave your body entirely. You wiggle them again. Nothing dramatic happens. This is disappointing. Winter travel in 1881 is a constant exercise in preserving heat without access to any of the things you now consider normal. There is no heater blowing warm air toward your ankles, no heated footwell, no insulated floor designed by an automotive engineer who has personally experienced February. The floorboards beneath your boots are simply floorboards. Below them is cold air. Beyond that is frozen road. The coach is moving fast enough to create more airflow around every imperfect joint and opening. Your boots matter enormously. Good leather footwear, heavy stockings or socks, and dry feet can make the difference between uncomfortable travel and genuinely dangerous exposure. If your socks become damp, whether from snow, perspiration, or an unfortunate step during a station stop, the cold works faster. Moisture conducts heat away from the body much more effectively than dry air. Nobody in the coach explains this using modern thermodynamics. They simply know that wet feet in winter are bad news. People have learnt this the old-fashioned way, by regretting it. You try stamping your feet lightly. There is a problem. The coach is full. The man opposite you already has one boot positioned between yours. Another passenger has tucked a carpet bag beneath the seat. Someone's skirt occupies the remaining space to your left. So what you produce is not really stamping. It is more of a restrained 19th-century shuffle. The man opposite looks down. You give him a small apologetic nod. He understands immediately. His feet are cold too. Soon several people are quietly moving their boots, flexing ankles, rubbing gloved hands over knees and attempting to encourage circulation without turning the coach into a folk dance. The buffalo robe helps. You pull it lower toward your boots. Someone beside you pulls it higher toward his thighs. The political crisis returns. A compromise is reached. Again, the robe remains across the knees while its lower edge is tucked inward as far as possible, creating a pocket of slightly warmer air around your legs. This helps. Not enough. But enough to make you emotionally attached to the arrangement. At the next station, when the coach stops, you discover another useful technique. Movement. The door opens. Cold air rushes in. Everyone groans internally. But once outside, you can stand. You stamp your boots properly on the frozen ground. Blood moves. Your feet begin to tingle. This should feel reassuring. Instead it hurts. Pins and needles race through your toes with such enthusiasm that you briefly wonder whether complete numbness was preferable. You pace in a small circle while the horses are changed. The station yard is dark except for lanterns. Steam rises from the animals. Harness buckles knock. Men work quickly. You are walking for no purpose except to remind your lower legs that they remain employed. Then comes the call to board. You look at the coach. You look at your newly revived feet. You understand exactly what is about to happen to them, and you climb back in anyway. Within minutes, the cold begins reclaiming its territory. This cycle becomes part of the journey. Sit, freeze, wiggle, stamp when possible, warm briefly at a station, return to the coach, repeat. Eventually your standards change. You no longer expect warm feet. Warm feet belong to another life. Your ambition is now much more modest. Sensation. You would simply like to continue receiving messages from your toes. Every so often you test them. Left foot. Yes. Right foot. Mostly. Excellent. The coach rolls deeper into the night. Cold presses up through the floor. You pull the robe closer and flex your toes once more inside your boots. They respond faintly. Still there. Good. At this point, circulation is basically a luxury service. 12. Personal space officially closes for the night. As darkness settles, everyone begins expanding despite having nowhere to expand into. Heavy coats become bulkier. Legs reposition. Arms fold. Bags migrate. One passenger leans sideways. Another slides forward. Somebody's boot appears between yours. Nobody is deliberately invading anybody else's space because individual space no longer exists as a meaningful concept. You are now part of a temporary human arrangement assembled inside an oval wooden box. The warmth produced by several bodies is useful. The proximity required to produce it is less elegant. Modern adults become mildly irritated when someone uses the middle armrest on an airplane. Tonight, another man's entire sleeping body will eventually be leaning against you, and your primary concern will be whether moving him lets the cold in. At first, everyone still makes an effort to preserve some version of polite distance. Knees remain carefully within imaginary boundaries. Elbows stay close to ribs. Shoulders are angled politely away from one another. When the coach sways and two people accidentally collide, there are quiet apologies, a soft "beg your pardon" here and "excuse me" there. Everyone is still behaving as though the rules of ordinary society have followed you onto the road. This lasts perhaps an hour. Then the road continues, the cold deepens, fatigue settles over the compartment, and etiquette begins losing funding. Your coat has already bunched behind your back. The passenger beside you has shifted several times because one hip has gone numb. The man opposite has discovered that keeping both legs directly in front of him is physically impossible. So one knee now occupies the narrow space between yours. You accept this because there is nowhere else for it to go. Your right boot is currently beneath someone else's bench. Another boot is touching yours from the left, although you are no longer entirely sure who owns it. You could investigate, but doing so would require movement, conversation, and perhaps a level of intimacy nobody needs at this hour. The coach suddenly sways hard to one side. Everyone moves together. For a brief moment, the passengers on your bench lean heavily into one another before the leather thoroughbraces swing the body back toward level. Earlier in the evening there would have been apologies. Now nobody says anything. This is progress. The closeness is uncomfortable, but winter gives it a practical advantage. People generate heat, and inside an unheated stagecoach every warm body contributes something. The same passengers who seemed to occupy far too much space a few hours ago are now functioning as part of a crude communal heating system. You find yourself becoming less irritated by the shoulder pressed firmly against yours. In fact, when the man beside you shifts away for a moment, you notice the cold immediately. This is unsettling. You would prefer not to become emotionally dependent on a stranger's overcoat, yet here you are. There is also nowhere to stretch properly. Your back wants movement. Your knees want movement. Your ankles have begun submitting their own requests. Every part of your body would like several additional inches of territory, and every request is denied. You attempt to straighten one leg, but your boot immediately enters the space of the passenger opposite. You pull it back. He gives you a sympathetic nod because his spine is probably drafting the same complaint. The seats offer almost no meaningful alternative position. You can lean forward, but then your head enters the communal space between the benches. You can lean backward, but the wall is already there. You can shift sideways, but another human being has been installed in that direction. Your available range of motion is approximately the width of a respectable shrug. As the hours pass, everyone becomes less like a collection of individual travellers and more like pieces in a puzzle assembled incorrectly but permanently. A shoulder supports a head, a knee stabilizes a bag. One boot holds down the edge of the robe. Somebody's elbow becomes lodged against your sleeve and remains there for so long that removing it would now feel strangely personal. Conversation fades. The coach grows darker. People begin drifting into brief, uneven patches of sleep. This is where personal space disappears completely. The man beside you nods forward, wakes, then nods again. His shoulder presses harder into yours. A few minutes later, his head follows and settles against the side of your hat. You consider moving him. Then another thin stream of cold air slips through the curtain. He is warm, you are tired. The decision makes itself. By daylight, you would never sit this closely to a stranger unless circumstances were extremely unusual. Tonight, the circumstances are a winter stagecoach, several days of road ahead, freezing air outside, and nowhere else to put either of your bodies. That qualifies. You pull the robe slightly higher over both of you and settle back against the wall. Personal space will reopen in the morning. For now, the office is closed. 13. The male is travelling more comfortably than you are. Now let's give some attention to the male. By this point in the journey, you have probably stopped thinking of the stagecoach as a passenger vehicle and started thinking of it as a moving argument about space. You have people, coats, blankets, luggage, boots, food, and several hundred miles of discomfort all competing for the same few square feet. Yet somehow there is still another important customer aboard, the United States Mail. Stagecoaches on routes like this are not carrying travellers simply because a handful of people have decided they would like to spend several days being shaken north through winter. They are part of a much larger communication network. Letters, newspapers, business correspondence, government documents, invoices, orders, and personal news all have to move between railway towns and communities that the rails have not yet reached. Deadwood may be far from the main railroad, but it is not cut off from the rest of the country. Not if the stage can keep moving. Mail bags are therefore serious cargo. They may be packed into the coach boots, secured with other freight, or placed wherever the load permits. On some journeys, sacks can end up inside the passenger compartment itself, occupying space with the remarkable confidence of something protected by federal importance. You look at one of the heavy canvas bags and begin feeling slightly resentful. It has no knees. It does not get cold. It cannot develop back pain, and nobody expects it to make polite conversation. The mail is having an excellent trip. There is also something faintly ridiculous about realizing that a letter may reach Deadwood in better condition than you do. Somewhere inside one of those bags is perhaps a carefully written note from a mother to her son, a bill from a merchant, a newspaper several days old, or a business letter explaining that payment is overdue. All of these documents are lying peacefully together. You, meanwhile, have lost sensation in one foot. The mail system matters enormously in a place like the Black Hills. News travels through letters and newspapers. Merchants place orders. Families stay connected across immense distances. Mining companies communicate with investors and suppliers. People waiting in isolated towns watch for the stage not merely because new passengers might arrive, but because information arrives with it. A stagecoach pulling into town can bring news of elections, prices, deaths, marriages, wars, court cases, and scandals that happened days or weeks earlier. The world enters in sacks. This makes delays important. A snowstorm does not simply inconvenience travellers, it delays correspondence. A broken axle can hold up business. A washed-out crossing or exhausted team can leave an entire town waiting for newspapers and letters that people have been expecting for days. There are no emails to refresh. No messages arriving instantly. No little spinning symbol suggesting that the problem may resolve itself if you stare at the screen long enough. There is simply the road. If the stage does not arrive, the news does not arrive. For you, however, the mail has another use. You look at the sacks again. They are firm, slightly yielding, and shaped almost perfectly for supporting a tired human body. Travellers in the stagecoach era sometimes used whatever was available to make themselves more comfortable, and a mailbag or piece of luggage could become an improvised support if circumstances allowed. You understand the temptation immediately. One sack beside your leg looks remarkably pillow-like. This thought would have seemed absurd in Sydney. Now it feels inspired. You shift slightly and allow your shoulder to rest against a nearby bag. It is not soft. Nobody would mistake it for hotel bedding, but it stays where it is. It does not complain. It does not breathe on you. It does not suddenly claim more of the buffalo robe. Compared with your fellow passengers, the Federal Mail has excellent manners. The coach rocks onward through the darkness. Somewhere inside the sack against you are dozens of private lives folded into envelopes and sealed shut. People are waiting for them. You are helping carry them north. And for the moment, they are helping hold you upright. The mail service has become your lumbar support. This is probably not what Congress intended. 14. Every few miles the horses receive better treatment than you. Eventually, lantern light appears ahead. At first it is only a small yellow glow against the darkness, so faint that you wonder whether you imagined it. Then another light appears beside it, followed by the outline of a low building, a stable, fencing, and several dark shapes moving in the yard. The coach begins to slow. Hooves lose their steady pounding rhythm. Harness chains settle into softer clinks. You have reached another stage station. To you, this means one thing: a chance to get out. To the stage company, however, the important event is happening at the other end of the coach. The horses are being changed. A hard-running stage team cannot simply pull a loaded coach for 275 miles and then enjoy a carrot at Deadwood. Teams are changed regularly along established routes, often after relatively short runs depending on terrain, weather, and the condition of the animals. Fresh horses keep the coach moving at a useful pace while tired teams are taken into the station, fed, watered, rubbed down, and rested before another coach comes through. You hear men calling outside before the door even opens. Someone is already moving toward the horses. The driver loosens his lines. Station hands step into the lantern glow. Buckles are released. Traces come free. Steam rises from the animals' backs and nostrils in pale clouds. The horses have worked hard. Their coats are damp with sweat beneath the harness despite the winter air. Their breathing is heavy. Frost gathers around the edges of leather and hair. Everyone recognizes immediately that they need rest. This is where your relationship with the transportation system becomes slightly personal, because you also need rest. You've been sitting in one cramped position for hours. Your feet are cold. Your back has discovered muscles you did not know were available. One shoulder has been supporting a stranger's head. You have slept for perhaps 11 minutes in total, although 3 of those may simply have been a period of emotional withdrawal. Nobody unhitches you. Nobody leads you gently into a warm stable. Nobody rubs you down with straw. The door opens. You climb out yourself. Your legs initially react to standing with uncertainty. You straighten slowly and discover that your knees have temporarily forgotten what their original purpose was. Blood begins returning to your feet. Your back lengthens with a series of quiet objections. Around you, the horse change proceeds efficiently. The tired team is led away. Fresh horses are brought from the stable, alert and restless in the cold. Harness is adjusted. Traces are connected. Men move from animal to animal checking equipment with practiced hands. This operation happens quickly because the entire stage system depends on it. A coach earns nothing by sitting still. Mail does not become more useful while waiting in a yard. Passengers become increasingly difficult to manage once they have discovered a warm room, so stations are designed to keep things moving. You stamp your boots on the frozen earth and watch the former team disappear toward shelter. They are finished for now. You are not. This seems unfair. One of the horses receives water. You become interested in water. Another is led beneath cover. You become interested in cover. A station hand examines a hoof. Nobody has inspected your feet despite several hours of very concerning developments. The difference, of course, is economic rather than sentimental. Horses are valuable equipment. A stage line needs healthy, usable teams positioned along the route. Exhaust an animal completely, and the system stops working. Properly managed relay teams allow coaches to continue over long distances without asking the same horses to do impossible work. You understand this. You support responsible horse management. You would simply like the policy extended to passengers. For a few beautiful minutes, however, standing feels magnificent. You pace beside the coach. You stretch your legs. You roll your shoulders. Cold air fills your lungs, but movement produces warmth in a way sitting beneath a robe never quite managed. You begin to feel almost human again. Then the fresh team is ready. The driver climbs back into position. Someone calls for the passengers. You look toward the stable where the tired horses are settling in for their well-earned rest. Then you look at the open coach door. The horses have completed their shift. Yours apparently continues until South Dakota. 15. Your 5-minute break becomes the best 5 minutes of your life. Get out. Quickly. The coach door opens at the relay station, and every passenger suddenly discovers a remarkable enthusiasm for standing. You unfold yourself from the seat, duck through the doorway, and place both boots on frozen ground with the careful concentration of someone relearning a skill once considered automatic. For several seconds, your legs do not feel entirely trustworthy. They have spent hours bent beneath you, wedged around luggage, pressed against other people's knees, and denied almost every ordinary movement. Now they are expected to support your full weight as though nothing unusual has happened. You straighten slowly. Your back objects. Your knees object. Your feet begin tingling as circulation returns, which is uncomfortable enough to make you briefly nostalgic for numbness. Then you start walking, and walking is magnificent. You do not even have anywhere to go. You simply cross the station yard, turn around, and come back. Then you do it again. There is no destination involved. You are taking a recreational tour of approximately 20 yards of frozen Nebraska because your body has spent the evening folded into a stagecoach and has become extremely easy to entertain. The station is hardly luxurious. A low building stands beside the road, perhaps with a stable nearby and a few outbuildings around it. Lanterns cast small pools of yellow light across packed earth and patches of snow. Horses breathe clouds into the darkness while station hands work quickly around the coach. To you it looks wonderful. It has ground, flat ground, ground that is not swaying. You stand still for several seconds simply to enjoy the experience of the horizon remaining where you left it. Inside the coach, every movement has been a negotiation with the road. Here, the earth merely exists beneath you. You had forgotten this was an option. You stamp your boots to restore warmth, you stretch your shoulders, you twist gently at the waist and discover exactly how stiff you have become. Another passenger is performing the same strange collection of movements nearby. Nobody comments. There is immediate solidarity among people temporarily released from inadequate seating. A man who barely spoke to you inside the coach is now pacing enthusiastically in circles. Another passenger leans backward, hands against his lower back, looking toward the sky with the expression of someone receiving divine revelation through his spine. The cold is still severe, but it feels different while you are moving. Inside the coach, cold slowly works its way into your clothes as you sit helplessly beneath blankets. Outside, your muscles are working again, blood is moving, your boots strike the ground. You almost feel warm. This creates a dangerous sense of confidence. For perhaps 30 seconds, you begin imagining that you have adapted beautifully to frontier travel. Look at you, walking around in winter, perfectly capable, practically an outdoorsman. Then the wind crosses the open yard and goes directly through your coat. You immediately reconsider. Nearby, the horse change continues. Harness comes off the tired team and goes onto fresh animals. Buckles are checked, traces are attached. The driver may step down briefly, speak with station hands, inspect the team, or take whatever tiny opportunity exists to stretch before climbing back into his exposed seat. Nobody is wasting time. This is the important detail. Your wonderful break is not actually a break in the modern sense. The stage company has not stopped because it wants you refreshed. It has stopped because horses need changing. Your comfort is an accidental side benefit. You begin calculating how much time remains. Surely you have several minutes, perhaps 10, maybe enough to step inside. You glance toward the station building and imagine warmth. There may be a stove, perhaps coffee, a chair that does not move. You take 2 hopeful steps in that direction. Then someone calls that the fresh team is nearly ready. Of course they are. You have been free for approximately the lifespan of a nervous housefly. Passengers start drifting reluctantly back toward the coach. Nobody moves quickly now. Everyone suddenly develops an interest in one final stretch. One more stamp of the boots. One last enormous breath of cold air. You look through the open coach door. Your old position is waiting exactly where you left it. The same cramped seat, the same neighbouring shoulder, the same small patch of floor reserved jointly for several unrelated pairs of feet. For 5 glorious minutes, you are an independent human being again. Now the driver is climbing back up. You sigh, bend toward the doorway, and fold yourself into the coach. The door closes. The horses move. Within 30 seconds, you would happily pay for another 5 minutes of standing. 16. Supper arrives at a road ranch with no reviews. Eventually you reach one of the larger stations where passengers may actually eat. This changes the mood inside the coach immediately because, until now, every stop has meant fresh horses, a few hurried minutes of movement, and the depressing realization that the animals are being properly rested while you are simply being unfolded and packed back in again. This station is different. A larger building stands beside the road. Smoke is rising from the chimney. Light is glowing through the windows, and somewhere inside there is the unmistakable promise of hot food. The coach rolls into the yard and stops, and before anyone formally announces supper, the passengers are already preparing to climb out. You follow them down onto the frozen ground and look toward the doorway, where warm yellow light spills into the darkness. After several hours inside a cold, swaying wooden compartment, it may be the most beautiful thing you have seen all day. Stage stations on western routes vary enormously in size and comfort. Some exist mainly to change horses and provide basic shelter for the men who work there, while larger road ranches may offer meals, beds, drinks, supplies, and whatever else passing travellers are willing to pay for. There is no guarantee that any of this will be especially good. There is simply a building, a stove, and food that is not currently moving at 10 miles an hour, which already places the establishment well above the coach in your personal rankings. You step inside and immediately feel the heat against your face. Your fingers begin to ache as they warm, your coat suddenly feels far too heavy, and the smell of coffee, wood smoke, cooked meat, grease, and damp wool fills the room. Under ordinary circumstances, you might describe the atmosphere as rough. Tonight, it feels luxurious. There may be a long communal table rather than private tables, with benches or simple chairs arranged around it. Travellers sit alongside station workers, drivers, and perhaps local men who have stopped in for a meal. Nobody asks whether you have a reservation, and nobody presents a menu. You eat whatever has been prepared, which may include beef or pork, bread, beans, potatoes, gravy, preserved vegetables, or eggs if the chickens have shown sufficient commitment to the enterprise. You sit down and notice immediately that the chair does not move. This alone feels extravagant. Then a plate is placed in front of you, and whatever standards you brought from civilization collapse completely. The meat may be tough, the bread may be heavy, and the coffee may have been boiled long enough to remove several of its original intentions, but you do not care. Everything is hot. After hours in freezing darkness, temperature has become more important than flavor. The first mouthful of warm food reaches your stomach and improves your opinion of the entire journey. You wrap both hands around the coffee cup and briefly consider staying here forever. Around the table, conversation becomes livelier. Passengers who had fallen silent inside the coach begin talking again, and the driver exchanges information with station workers or travelers who have recently come from the opposite direction. Someone has heard that snow is worse farther north. Another man says a crossing is difficult. A freighter mentions that the road beyond the next station is badly drifted. This is your weather forecast. There is no map refreshing every few minutes and no cheerful warning appearing on a screen. There is simply a man near the stove who came through yesterday, and everyone listens to him with complete seriousness. The station itself depends on the road just as much as you do. Flour, coffee, sugar, preserved food, lamp oil, tools, and other supplies all have to be hauled here through the same conditions you are complaining about. That means the kitchen works with whatever has arrived and whatever can survive storage. Reliability matters more than variety. A barrel of beans that remains useful for weeks is more valuable than an elegant ingredient that spoils before the next coach appears. You begin to understand why descriptions of stage station meals range from surprisingly good to deeply personal acts of hostility. Quality depends on the station, the cook, the weather, the available supplies, and how hungry the traveller happens to be. Tonight, you are hungry enough to forgive almost anything. Then someone announces that the fresh team is nearly ready, and the room changes at once. Passengers look down at unfinished coffee with genuine sadness. You take one final drink and enjoy the warmth of the cup between your hands. For a few precious minutes, you have been fed, warm, and completely stationary. Then you stand, pull your coat back on, and head toward the door. Outside, the coach is waiting in the darkness. There are no reviews for the road ranch, but after tonight you would gladly give it 5 stars simply because the floor stayed where it was. 17. The toilet situation requires a coat and resolve. Now that you've eaten and drunk coffee, your body introduces a problem that the stage schedule has no particular interest in solving. For the last several hours you have been cold, cramped, and mostly concerned with keeping circulation in your feet. The warm meal has improved matters considerably, and the coffee has restored a level of optimism you probably did not deserve. Unfortunately, coffee also comes with consequences, and somewhere between your second cup and the announcement that the fresh team is nearly ready, you become aware that you need to use the toilet. This would be a minor inconvenience in your own time. You would stand up, walk down a hallway, open a door, and enter a heated room containing indoor plumbing. In 1881, at an isolated stage station in the middle of a winter night, the process requires considerably more clothing and emotional preparation. The station may have a privy somewhere outside, usually positioned at a respectful distance from the main building, because 19th-century sanitation works best when the problem is simply moved farther away. There is no warm corridor leading to it. There is no light automatically switching on when you approach. There is a door, a seat, a hole, and perhaps a lantern if somebody has been thoughtful. You put your coat back on, then your scarf, then your gloves. You have just removed all of these things because the room was warm, and now you must rebuild yourself for the outdoors simply to accomplish something your body has been managing independently since infancy. The door opens and the cold hits you immediately. Your confidence disappears. The privy stands across the yard, perhaps near an outbuilding, visible only as a dark little shape beyond the lantern light. Snow crunches beneath your boots as you make your way toward it. The wind finds the opening at your collar. Your breath clouds in front of you. Suddenly the coffee feels like a tactical error. The privy itself is unlikely to impress you. It may be a simple wooden structure with one or more seats cut into a bench above a pit. In some places, facilities are even more basic. Privacy exists, but luxury has not been invited. The seat is cold. This is perhaps the most important historical detail. You have spent your life treating toilet seats as neutral objects. Tonight, the wooden surface has been sitting in winter air for hours, and has developed a temperature ordinarily associated with tools stored in a shed. You hesitate. History waits. Eventually necessity wins. There is also the question of clothing. Men have a relatively straightforward arrangement compared with women travelling in layers of skirts, petticoats, stockings, and winter garments. Nothing about this process has been designed for speed. Yet speed suddenly feels like an excellent idea. You finish as quickly as dignity allows. There is no toilet paper in the modern sense waiting on a convenient roll. Depending on the place and what is available, people might use paper, scraps, old newspapers, or other practical substitutes. By the 1880s, commercially produced toilet paper exists, but it is hardly guaranteed to be waiting for you at a remote road station. You are once again reminded that modern life contains a surprising number of luxuries disguised as boring household objects. Then comes hand washing. Perhaps there is a basin inside the station. Perhaps there is water available near the kitchen or pump. Whatever the arrangement, hot running water does not emerge from a tap because you have asked politely. You return toward the building with renewed appreciation for plumbing. The warm room feels wonderful when you step back inside. Heat touches your face. The stove glows. The remains of supper are still on the table. You feel almost victorious. Then you remember the coach. Someone announces that the horses are ready. Of course they are. You had exactly enough time to eat, drink coffee, walk into the freezing darkness, negotiate 19th-century sanitation, and return before being placed back into a wooden vehicle for several more hours. You pull your gloves tight and head outside again. The driver is waiting. The fresh team is restless. The coach door is open. You climb aboard, settle beneath the robe, and make yourself one quiet promise. At the next station, 1 cup of coffee. 18. You get back into the coach voluntarily. Here is the remarkable part. After warmth, supper, coffee, movement, and several wonderful minutes spent standing upright like a properly assembled human being, you go back outside and climb into the stagecoach again. Nobody forces you. Nobody threatens you. There is no armed guard checking that you have fulfilled your contractual obligation to suffer. You simply pull your coat tight, walk across the frozen yard, look at the dark coach waiting beneath the lanterns, and voluntarily return to the seat that has spent the evening reorganizing your spine. This is what travel requires if you want to reach Deadwood. The fresh team is already harnessed. The horses are restless after standing in the cold, their breath rising in pale clouds as the station hands finish checking traces and buckles. The driver has returned to his exposed seat above the coach, apparently willing to resume several more hours of being personally introduced to winter. Mail and baggage remain secured. The stage company has completed everything it needed to accomplish. Unfortunately, so have you. You reach the door and begin the familiar process of folding yourself inside. The warm room behind you suddenly seems impossibly far away, even though it is perhaps 20 yards from where you stand. You can still see light through the windows. Somewhere inside is a stove. There are chairs. There is coffee. You briefly consider whether Deadwood really needs you. Then another passenger climbs aboard behind you, ending the philosophical portion of the evening. Everyone attempts to reclaim approximately the same place they occupied before supper. This sounds simple, but stagecoach seating has already developed its own geography. The man who sat beside you returns to his corner. The woman opposite arranges her skirts. Carpet bags are pushed beneath benches again. Boots search for familiar spaces on the floor. The buffalo robe comes back out. This causes more attention than anything else. It is spread across the same collection of knees, and passengers immediately begin adjusting its edges with the concentration of diplomats restoring borders after a minor European conflict. You settle against the wall. Your body remembers the seat before your mind does. The pressure returns to the same hip, your knees return to the same restricted angle, your shoulders find the same patch of wooden panelling. It is astonishing how quickly discomfort can become familiar. For the first few minutes, however, you still carry warmth from the station. Your stomach is full, your hands are warmer, your feet have recovered some feeling after walking around the yard. The coffee is doing energetic work somewhere inside you. You begin to think that perhaps this part will be easier. This is optimism caused by temporary heating. The coach door closes. Immediately, the warm station disappears. The interior becomes dim again, lit only briefly by whatever lantern glow reaches through the curtains. The driver speaks to the team. Harness tightens. The horses lean forward. The coach moves. There is that first familiar roll as the leather thoroughbraces take the weight. Then the wheels strike the road outside the station yard, and everything begins swaying again. Your body reacts with disappointment. Within minutes, the cold starts returning. The warmth trapped in your coat slowly fades. The floor beneath your boots becomes noticeable again. A draft finds the edge of the curtain with impressive efficiency. Someone pulls the robe tighter. The man beside you shifts closer. Nobody objects. The strange intimacy of the coach resumes as though supper had merely been an intermission. This is one of the hardest things for a modern traveller to understand. The journey does not end because you are tired. It does not even become especially interested in the fact that you are tired. The coach runs according to horses, stations, road conditions, schedules, and daylight, only when daylight happens to be useful. Your comfort is not one of the controlling variables. You have eaten. You have stretched. You have used the facilities. Therefore, as far as the transportation system is concerned, you are fully restored. The coach sways into the darkness. Behind you, the road ranch grows smaller until the warm windows vanish entirely. Ahead lies another stretch of winter road, another relay station, and eventually another opportunity to get out. You pull the robe higher and settle against the wall. You have voluntarily returned to the coach. This may be the strongest evidence yet that you really want to reach Deadwood. 19. Darkness removes the landscape and leaves only sound. Once night fully closes around you, the journey becomes something entirely different. During the last of the daylight, you could still look through the coach curtain and reassure yourself with the landscape. You could see the pale road stretching ahead, the open prairie, patches of snow, distant ridges, and the occasional building appearing against the horizon. Now all of that has vanished. The world outside has been reduced to darkness, and your stagecoach seems to be travelling through an enormous empty space that you can hear but no longer see. At first, you keep lifting the edge of the curtain to look outside. There is very little reward for doing this. Perhaps moonlight catches a strip of snow beside the road. Perhaps you glimpse the dark outline of the horses ahead or the faint glow of the driver's lantern. Most of the time, you simply receive a face full of freezing air and an excellent view of nothing. Eventually, you leave the curtain alone. Your ears begin doing the work your eyes were doing earlier. The horses produce the most constant sound. Their hooves strike frozen ground in a steady, complicated rhythm, sometimes hard and sharp over firm earth, sometimes softer where snow covers the road. The pattern changes whenever the team slows for rough terrain, or begins pulling harder on an incline. Even without seeing them, you can tell when the horses are working. Harness chains add their own music. Metal rings knock softly against leather. Buckles shift. Traces tighten and relax. Somewhere above you, the driver occasionally calls to the team, his voice passing over the roof and disappearing into the night. Then there are the wheels. You become surprisingly good at reading the road through them. Smooth, steady rumbling means the surface is behaving itself. A sudden hard knock announces a stone. A violent sequence of rattles means the coach has entered another stretch of frozen ruts. When one wheel drops into a hole, you hear it almost at the same moment your body receives the official notification. The coach itself never becomes completely quiet. Wood creaks as the body moves on the thoroughbraces. Leather groans beneath the shifting weight. Fittings knock gently against one another. The doors and curtains make small noises whenever wind presses against them. It sounds less like sitting inside a vehicle and more like living temporarily inside a very large piece of furniture being dragged down a staircase. At first, every sound demands your attention. A crack outside makes you wonder whether something has broken. A sudden shout from the driver wakes everyone. A change in the horse's pace makes you look toward the curtain. Somewhere in the distance, an animal may call across the plains, and several passengers briefly become more alert. Then nothing happens. The coach keeps moving. Gradually, you learn which sounds matter and which ones simply belong to the road. The passengers become quieter too. Supper conversation has faded. The coffee's brief optimism has worn off. People retreat into coats, blankets, and whatever position their bodies have accepted for the night. Occasionally someone coughs. Someone clears a throat. A passenger shifts, and the robe moves across several knees. Boots scrape the floor as somebody tries once again to find a position that does not exist. Nobody has enough energy for sustained conversation. This creates a strange kind of peace. The coach is uncomfortable, cold, cramped, and relentlessly mobile, but the darkness removes almost every distraction. There is nothing to look at. There is nowhere to go. There is nothing useful you can do about the next 100 miles. For perhaps the first time since Sydney, you stop trying to manage the journey. You simply listen. Hooves strike the road. Wheels turn. Leather creaks. Wind brushes the curtains. The coach rises and settles beneath you with its slow, rolling motion. The sounds begin repeating until they lose their individual edges and blend into one continuous rhythm. It is almost soothing. Almost. Then the right wheel strikes something large enough to throw everyone sideways. The man beside you wakes with a confused grunt, and somebody's carpet bag travels several inches across the floor. The coach settles again. Nobody speaks. The hooves continue. Darkness apparently has excellent timing. 20. Now you attempt something called sleep. It's finally time. You have been travelling for hours. The road has disappeared into darkness. Conversation inside the coach has faded to the occasional murmur, and exhaustion is beginning to overpower almost everything else. Your back hurts. Your legs have been folded into the same narrow arrangement for far too long. Your feet are cold, and the buffalo robe across your knees has become one of the most important relationships in your life. Under normal circumstances, this would be the moment you go to bed. Unfortunately, your bed tonight is a moving stagecoach. There is no reclining seat, no bunk hidden at the back, and certainly no pillow waiting beneath a clean white sheet. You remain exactly where you have been sitting since the previous station, upright on a narrow upholstered bench with several other adults packed around you. The only improvement is that everyone has finally become too tired to complain about it. You begin trying to arrange yourself for sleep. You pull your coat tighter and raise the collar around your neck. You shift slightly toward the wooden wall beside you and attempt to use it as support. The wall is cold enough to discourage direct contact, so you fold part of your coat between your head and the panelling. This creates something that could generously be described as a pillow if every actual pillow on Earth had suddenly disappeared. You close your eyes. The coach sways left. Your head slides. You open your eyes again. You try another position and tuck your chin slightly toward your chest. This feels promising until the coach rolls in the opposite direction and your neck reminds you that it was not designed to sleep at the angle of a broken umbrella. The experienced travellers seem less troubled. They have learned an important lesson that you are only beginning to understand. You cannot fight the motion of the coach all night. The leather thoroughbraces allow the body to roll and sway with the road, and if you tense yourself against every movement, you will arrive in Deadwood feeling as though you personally carried the coach there. So, you stop resisting. You let your shoulders move gently with the compartment. You allow your body to follow the slow rocking instead of constantly correcting against it. Gradually, the movement becomes less irritating. The wheels rumble beneath you. Hooves beat steadily somewhere ahead. Leather creaks, harness chains make their quiet metallic rhythm, and the coach settles into something almost hypnotic. Your eyes close again. This time they remain closed. Your thoughts begin losing their edges. You stop thinking about the next station and the cold around the curtains. You stop wondering how many miles remain. Your chin drops slightly. Your breathing slows. For several wonderful minutes, you begin drifting toward real sleep. Then your head lands on the passenger beside you. You wake immediately and straighten yourself. He wakes too, although only enough to understand that another human being has briefly become part of his furniture. You offer a quiet apology. He gives a tired nod. Several minutes later, his head lands on your shoulder. You consider pointing out the hypocrisy. You do not have the energy. Instead, you leave him there. His coat is warm, his weight is manageable, and moving him would require both of you to become fully conscious. By this stage of the night, social etiquette has been reduced to one simple principle. If everyone is warm and nobody is screaming, the arrangement is acceptable. Eventually, you fall asleep properly. Not deeply, and certainly not comfortably, but enough that the sounds of the road begin to recede. Your muscles loosen. Your head settles against the wall. The stranger remains against your shoulder. The robe stays across your knees, and for a short stretch of darkness, your exhausted body simply gives up arguing with the conditions. Then a wheel drops into a deep rut. The coach lurches violently, your eyes open, several passengers jerk upright, and somebody's boot strikes yours beneath the seat. A bag slides across the floor while the coach swings back on its thoroughbraces. Everyone wait. Nothing has broken. The coach remains upright. The horses continue forward. Nobody complains because complaining would only delay the important business of becoming unconscious again. You close your eyes. This is how you sleep through the night in 1881. You do not get 8 uninterrupted hours. You collect sleep in fragments between ruts, horse changes, cold drafts, awkward shoulders, and whatever fresh insult the road has prepared. 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there become enough. Eventually, exhaustion lowers your standards so completely that simply remaining unconscious while sitting upright feels like an extraordinary achievement. You have not slept well. You have barely slept at all. But somewhere between Sydney and Deadwood, inside a swaying wooden coach on a frozen road, you have technically slept. For tonight that counts. 21. Every rut conducts a surprise inspection. You are asleep now. Almost. Your eyes are closed, your breathing has slowed, and your body has finally stopped objecting to every movement of the coach. One shoulder is wedged against the wooden side. Your chin has found a position that would alarm a modern physiotherapist, and the buffalo robe is still covering enough of your legs to make the arrangement tolerable. The wheels continue rumbling beneath you, but exhaustion has softened the sound until it feels distant. For several peaceful minutes you are no longer consciously travelling toward Deadwood. Then the road remembers you. One wheel drops sharply into a frozen rut. The coach dips to one side, and your entire body wakes before your mind has any idea what is happening. Your head lifts, your boots slide forward. The passenger beside you jerks upright. Somewhere opposite, a carpet bag shifts across the floor with the confidence of an object that has been waiting all evening for independence. For one confused second, nobody speaks. You are simply awake. The coach swings back on its leather thoroughbraces and settles into its normal rolling motion. The horses continue. The driver does not shout. Nothing appears to have broken. Apparently this was not an emergency. This was road. You close your eyes again. This is the difficulty with sleeping aboard a stagecoach. The same suspension that protects you from the full violence of every obstacle also makes sure you remain informed about most of them. A Concorde coach can absorb punishment remarkably well, but it cannot transform a rough western road into a bedroom. Every rut, stone, frozen ridge, washout, and badly chosen wheel track still sends some form of message upward. Your spine receives all correspondence personally. You drift towards sleep again, and the coach begins to feel almost gentle. It rocks slowly from side to side. The steady hoofbeats blend with the wheel noise. Your head sinks toward the wall. Then the road produces another inspection. This time the coach rises rather than drops. One side lifts over a hardened ridge. Everyone leans together, and you wake with the distinct impression that the entire compartment has briefly decided to climb a staircase. The man opposite catches his hat before it falls over his face. Someone murmurs something under their breath. The coach settles. Nobody complains. You are all becoming professionals. Earlier in the journey, every violent movement caused alarm. Passengers looked toward the door. Someone asked what happened. Bodies stiffened as though personal vigilance might improve the road surface. Now you simply wake, check that the coach is still upright, and return to sleep. Your standards have adapted beautifully. This happens repeatedly throughout the night. You fall asleep for perhaps 15 minutes, wake when the wheels strike a rough patch, rearrange yourself, and disappear again. Sometimes you are awake long enough to hear the driver call to the team. Sometimes you wake only because another passenger has been thrown gently against you and then immediately goes back to sleep without explanation. Occasionally the rut is large enough to produce a complete reorganization. A boot slips free from beneath the opposite bench. A bag moves. The robe slides several inches. Someone who had been sleeping against the wall wakes resting against a stranger instead. The correction takes place almost entirely in silence. This is not because everyone is exceptionally polite. It is because speaking requires waking up properly, and nobody wishes to make that commitment. There is also no useful complaint available. The driver cannot simply avoid every rut in darkness. The road is rough because that is what the road is. There is no maintenance crew waiting ahead with reflective jackets and a cheerful sign promising smoother pavement in 3 miles. The stagecoach follows the best line available. Your body follows the stagecoach. Eventually you develop the strange ability to sleep through smaller disturbances. A gentle sway no longer wakes you. A modest bump becomes part of the rhythm. Even some harder jolts fail to fully break through your exhaustion. Only the serious ruts still conduct inspections. They arrive without appointment, verify that you remain alive, rearrange several possessions, and leave. By the small hours of the morning, you have stopped taking it personally. The coach hits another frozen depression and rocks sharply. Your eyes open. Everything remains attached. You close them again. Excellent. Inspection passed. 22. A stranger's shoulder becomes furnished accommodation. At some point, social resistance collapses. You have spent enough hours inside the coach that the ordinary rules governing physical distance no longer seem especially relevant. Earlier in the evening, every accidental touch came with an apology. A knee bumped yours and someone immediately shifted away. A shoulder pressed against your coat, and both of you tried to correct the problem. Now nobody has the energy to keep pretending that 9 exhausted people can occupy a small moving compartment without eventually becoming part of the furniture for one another. The first surrender happens quietly. The passenger beside you has been fighting sleep for the last half hour, and you have watched the process with growing sympathy. His head drops forward, jerks back up, leans toward the wall, then returns to center. Each time he manages to recover just before gravity fully commits him to another person. Eventually, gravity wins. His head settles against your shoulder. You wake enough to notice, but not enough to object. For a few seconds, you consider moving. Under normal circumstances, waking up with a stranger sleeping against you would produce immediate discomfort and perhaps a polite but firm adjustment. Tonight, the stranger is warm, your shoulder is already numb, and shifting him would require both of you to become fully conscious. You decide that this is unnecessary, so he stays. The arrangement is not comfortable exactly, but it is stable. His weight keeps you from rolling too far toward the aisle when the coach sways. Your shoulder gives his neck somewhere to rest. The buffalo robe remains across both your laps. For the first time all night, 2 human beings have accidentally solved several problems at once. You begin to understand why exhausted travelers become less particular about dignity. A little later, the coach rolls hard to one side, and your own head slips from the wall. You correct yourself once, then twice. Eventually you drift off again and discover, some unknown number of minutes later, that your head is resting against his. Neither of you remembers agreeing to this arrangement. No agreement was required. The stagecoach has become its own tiny civilization with temporary laws. Personal space has been suspended. Shoulders are communal. Knees are negotiated territory. A sleeping passenger may lean against another passenger provided nobody is made significantly colder by the adjustment. This is now accepted practice. Across from you, another traveller has fallen asleep with his chin on his chest. The woman beside him is braced against the corner, her shoulder supporting part of his coat whenever the coach rolls. Someone farther down the bench has folded their arms tightly and become almost completely motionless, as though the safest way to sleep is to imitate luggage. Nobody looks elegant. This is an important correction to every romantic image of stage travel. There is no graceful sleeping pose. There is no beautiful traveller resting serenely beneath a fur robe while moonlight enters through the curtain. Real sleep arrives with mouths slightly open, hats slipping sideways, collars crushed beneath chins, and strangers waking to discover that their bodies have formed an arrangement normally seen only during overcrowded holiday travel. The remarkable part is how quickly embarrassment disappears. Fatigue is powerful that way. By the middle of the night, warmth and support matter more than appearances. If another passenger's shoulder prevents your head from snapping forward every time you drift off, that shoulder has become valuable infrastructure. You begin treating it accordingly. The coach rolls through another rough section. Both of you sway together and then settle back into place without waking properly. The leather thoroughbraces groan beneath the body. Hooves beat steadily in the darkness. Somewhere above, the driver remains awake because somebody in this entire operation has to. You drift deeper. The stranger beside you is no longer a stranger in any practical sense. You may not know his full name. You may never see him again after Deadwood. You may have nothing in common beyond this route and the fact that both of you are currently exhausted enough to use each other as bedding. That is sufficient. By morning, ordinary etiquette will return. You will straighten your coat, recover your hat, perhaps exchange a polite nod, and behave as though neither of you spent half the night asleep against the other. For now, there is no need to discuss it. The road is long. The coach is cold, and the nearest available pillow has a moustache. 23. The coach develops its own atmosphere. Let's talk about the smell, because no historical experience is complete until modern nostalgia has been properly corrected. By now, the coach has been closed against the winter air for hours. The curtains are pulled down, The passengers are wrapped in heavy clothing, and everyone has spent most of the night breathing, eating, sleeping, and occasionally being thrown into one another by the road. The result is that the interior has developed its own atmosphere, and it is not the crisp pine-scented frontier experience suggested by modern gift shops. The first thing you notice is wool. Almost everyone is wearing some form of it because wool is practical, warm, and exactly what you want between yourself and a freezing night on the plains. Unfortunately, damp wool has a smell. Snow melts into coats at stations. Boots carry moisture inside. Perspiration collects beneath layers that cannot simply be removed whenever the coach becomes slightly warmer. All of this produces a thick, earthy scent that settles into the confined space. Then there is leather. The seats contain leather, the coach contains leather fittings, the thoroughbraces beneath you are made from enormous strips of it, and much of the harness outside is leather as well. New leather can smell rich and clean. Working leather that spent years absorbing dust, grease, sweat, rain, and horse has developed considerably more character. Your buffalo robe contributes too. Heavy animal hides are wonderfully warm, but nobody has promised that warmth must be fragrance-free. The robe carries the smell of fur, tanning, road dust, and whatever dampness it has collected during its working life. You have spent the evening defending your share of it with near political intensity, so you are in no position to complain now. The passengers add the rest. Nobody has taken a shower before boarding, because showers are not waiting in every hotel room in 1881. People wash, certainly, but travel does not allow the daily bathing routines you may consider normal. A man who has spent 2 days moving through winter in a wool suit and heavy overcoat is going to smell like a man who has spent 2 days moving through winter in a wool suit and heavy overcoat. This is not a moral failure. It is simply chemistry. There may also be tobacco. Someone has smoked a cigar earlier. Another passenger chews tobacco. Clothing absorbs smoke easily, and the smell follows them inside even if nobody is foolish enough to keep a cigar burning in the tightly packed wooden compartment. Then there are the boots. The boots have been walking through station yards used by horses. You do not need further explanation. Outside the coach, the air contains its own mixture. Every relay station has horses, manure, hay, feed, wood smoke, damp earth, and stable smells. The team itself produces heat and sweat as it works. When the coach slows, some of that reaches you through gaps around the curtains. Strangely, you stop noticing most of it. This is the remarkable part. The human nose adapts quickly. What seems strong when you first entered the coach becomes background after an hour. By midnight, you barely notice the wool, leather, tobacco, fur, boots, and accumulated humanity unless somebody opens the door. Then clean winter air rushes inside. For approximately 3 seconds, the difference is astonishing. You breathe deeply and realize that the compartment you have been sitting in has become a mobile ecosystem. Then the cold follows the fresh air. Everyone immediately wants the door closed. This tells you everything you need to know about priorities. Fresh air is lovely. Warmth is better. The door shuts, the robe is rearranged, and the coach returns to its familiar internal climate. The smell settles around you again, but now it feels almost reassuring because it means the freezing plains remain outside. You pull your collar higher, lean back against the wall, and close your eyes. The coach smells of wool, leather, fur, tobacco, horses, and 9 tired human beings. It is not pleasant. It is not unbearable. By this stage of the journey, it simply smells like home. 24. Snow quietly makes the road disappear. Sometime deep into the night, the snow begins to fall more seriously. You notice the change before you properly understand it because the coach sounds different beneath you. The hard rattle of iron-rimmed wheels over frozen earth gradually softens. The sharp bumps become duller, and the steady noise of the road seems to retreat beneath a growing layer of white. For a few moments, this is almost pleasant. The journey becomes quieter, the swaying feels gentler, and you begin to think that winter has finally decided to contribute something useful. Then the coach slows. You open your eyes and listen. The horses are still moving, but their rhythm has changed. Their hooves no longer strike the ground with the same clean beat. You can hear them pushing through softer snow, working harder as the team pulls the loaded coach forward. Somewhere above you, the driver calls to them, and there is more urgency in his voice than there was an hour ago. You lift the edge of the curtain and immediately receive a blast of freezing air across your face. Outside, the landscape has almost disappeared. Snow moves through the darkness in pale streaks, catching whatever faint light reaches it. The road itself is difficult to distinguish from the country around it. Wheel tracks are filling. Ruts are disappearing. Low patches of ground are being smoothed over until everything begins to look equally white and equally unhelpful. This is where the romantic winter scene becomes a transportation problem. A stage road across open country is already much less formal than the word road suggests. In clear weather, the driver can follow established wheel tracks, landmarks, creek crossings, ridges, buildings, and the accumulated knowledge of many previous journeys. Snow begins erasing those clues one by one. The wheel ruts disappear first, then smaller landmarks become harder to see. Wind can push snow into drifts that completely change the appearance of familiar ground. A shallow depression may fill until it looks level. A ditch may become almost invisible. The easiest track through a difficult stretch may vanish beneath several inches of fresh snow. There is no snowplow several miles ahead preparing the route for you. There is certainly no glowing line on a screen showing the driver exactly where to turn. The driver has experience, memory, judgment, and whatever he can still see. You suddenly become extremely interested in all four. Experienced stage drivers know their routes intimately. They remember the direction of the road, the position of stations, the shape of hills, difficult crossings, and stretches where drifting is common. They also rely on the horses more than you might expect. A team familiar with a route can sometimes follow an established path even when visual clues become poor. This is comforting until you realize that part of your navigation system now consists of horses remembering where they went last time. The coach continues more slowly. Inside, the passengers become quieter. Even those who are sleeping begin to notice the change. Someone raises the curtain on the opposite side, looks outside briefly, and lowers it again without comment. There is very little to say. Everyone can see the snow. The slower pace also changes the cold. When the coach was moving steadily, the constant rattling and swaying at least distracted you. Now each moment seems longer. Snow gathers against the lower edges of the coach. Wind pushes through gaps around the curtains. You pull the robe tighter and listen to the horses labour ahead. Every so often, the wheels find one of the old ruts hidden beneath the snow, and the coach drops unexpectedly into it. The road has not actually become smoother. Winter has simply covered the evidence. That feels unnecessarily deceptive. The driver calls again, and the team keeps moving. Somewhere ahead there should be another station with lanterns, shelter, fresh horses, and people who know what conditions are like farther north. For now, however, the station exists only in the driver's memory and your imagination. You look outside one final time. The road is gone, the prairie is gone, the horizon is gone. There is only snow passing through darkness and the faint shapes of horses pulling you forward. Then you lower the curtain. The coach continues north because apparently not being able to see the road is not the same thing as not having one. In 1881, sometimes the road is simply something the driver remembers. 25. Getting stuck is not a hypothetical problem. Eventually the coach slows again. At first you assume the driver is simply being cautious because the snow has thickened and the road has become difficult to see. The horses shorten their stride, the wheels turn more slowly, and the familiar rocking of the coach settles into a heavier movement. Then the entire vehicle gives a small lurch forward, stops, moves another few feet, and stops again. Somewhere outside, the driver calls sharply to the team. This is different. The passengers begin waking properly now. Heads lift from shoulders, blankets are adjusted, and someone raises the edge of a curtain to look outside. Snow presses against the lower part of the coach, and the wheel beside you appears to be sitting much deeper than it was earlier. The horses pull again, harness tightens. You hear the strain before you feel the movement. The coach rocks forward slightly, one wheel turns, and then everything settles back into exactly the same place. You are stuck. This is not an extraordinary event on a winter stage route. It is not desirable, obviously, but neither is it the kind of thing that causes experienced drivers to abandon the coach and begin writing farewell letters. Snowdrifts, mud, frozen ruts, steep approaches, creek crossings, and badly softened ground can all stop a loaded stagecoach. The important question is whether the obstacle can be cleared before the passengers become part of the landscape. The driver tries again. The horses lean into their collars, their hooves digging for purchase beneath the snow. The coach moves, perhaps a foot. Then nothing. You are beginning to understand that several thousand pounds of vehicle, luggage, mail, and passengers require considerable persuasion once the wheels stop cooperating. The door opens. Cold air rushes inside. Someone announces that the passengers need to get out. Naturally, you have paid to ride in the stagecoach, but apparently the ticket also includes moments when the best way to make the stagecoach travel is to stop being inside it. Everyone climbs down carefully into the snow. Your boots sink farther than expected, and the cold immediately finds the gaps around your clothing. Under lantern light, you can finally see the problem. One side of the coach has worked down into a drift or soft section of road, and the wheels are struggling to climb free. The horses are steaming with effort. Their sides move heavily beneath the harness, and the driver is not interested in exhausting them unnecessarily. Station teams are valuable, and forcing frightened or tired horses until something breaks would turn a delay into a much more serious problem. So the weight must be reduced. That means you. The passengers stand beside the road while the driver and anyone able to help assess the coach. Snow falls steadily around you. You stamp your feet and pull your coat tighter while several men begin clearing snow from around the wheels. There is no roadside assistance service coming. You are roadside assistance. Someone finds a shovel or similar tool if the coach carries one, or if a nearby station is close enough to provide help. Others kick or scrape loose snow away. The driver may attempt to rock the coach, encouraging the horses forward while the wheels are given the best possible chance to climb back onto firmer ground. You find yourself pushing against the rear quarter with several other passengers. This is not how you imagined the journey when you bought the ticket. You expected transportation. You did not expect a group project. The driver calls to the team. The horses pull. Everyone pushes. The wheel begins turning and throws snow backward. For a moment, nothing useful happens. Then the coach moves. Only slightly, but enough. Everyone pushes harder. The horses gain another step, then another. The wheel climbs out of the deepest part of the drift and finds firmer ground beneath it. Suddenly the coach rolls forward several yards. A small cheer passes through the group. Nobody is proud enough to admit how satisfying this feels. The coach is free. You brush snow from your coat and look toward the open door. Your seat waits inside, cold and cramped, and suddenly rather attractive because it is at least moving again. You climb aboard. The passengers settle back into place, the robe is rearranged, and the driver starts the team carefully forward. You have learned something useful tonight. Stagecoach travel is not guaranteed transportation. Sometimes it is transportation with audience participation. 26. The driver is doing far more than holding reins. This is a good moment to appreciate the driver. From inside the coach, his job can look deceptively simple. He is sitting above you holding a set of reins, telling the horses when to move, and occasionally shouting something into the darkness. You, meanwhile, are being bounced, chilled, cramped, and slowly turned into a human knot. It would be easy to assume he has the easier position. He does not. The driver is exposed to the full winter night. He receives the wind before you do, the snow before you do, and every sudden change in weather without even the limited protection of the coach body. He has no curtain to pull down, no wall to lean against, and no buffalo robe shared across several warm laps. He sits high above the road in heavy clothing, relying on layers, gloves, blankets, and experience to keep functioning, while everyone below him quietly complains about drafts. More importantly, he is responsible for the entire moving system. A stagecoach team can include 4, 6, or sometimes more horses depending on the route, load, and conditions. Managing them is not simply a matter of pulling left to turn left and right to turn right. Each horse has its own temperament, strength, habits, and place within the team. Some are steady, some are nervous. Some pull harder than others. Some become difficult when frightened. Some know the road well enough to anticipate parts of it before the passengers have any idea what is coming. The driver must feel all of this through the reins. He notices when one horse begins tiring. He notices when another is pulling unevenly. He watches for slipping hooves on frozen ground, and for signs that the team is becoming strained in deep snow. He has to judge when to push forward, and when doing so would turn a manageable delay into an injured animal or broken harness. Then there is the road itself. The driver needs to know where it goes, even when you can barely see it. He remembers creek crossings, slopes, difficult bends, relay stations, stretches where snow tends to drift, and places where wheels can sink into soft ground. He must read the surface constantly because one poor choice can put a wheel into a rut, slide the coach toward a ditch, or leave the whole vehicle stuck badly enough that everyone has to get out and rediscover their usefulness. You experienced that last part recently. He would prefer not to repeat it. The brake is also his responsibility. On steep descents, the coach cannot simply be allowed to run freely behind the horses. A loaded stage has weight and momentum, and that weight must be controlled so it does not push forward dangerously onto the team. Going downhill therefore requires as much judgment as climbing. Too much braking can make movement difficult. Too little can make the coach much more interested in gravity than the horses are. All of this happens while passengers remain behind him asking questions. How far is the next station? How bad is the snow? When will you reach Deadwood? Did you hear that noise? Was that wheel supposed to do that? The driver cannot turn around and explain every decision because he is currently trying to prevent 9 people, several bags of mail, and a large wooden vehicle from becoming a local landmark. He also has to understand the horses well enough to use his voice effectively. Drivers call to teams, encourage them, warn them, and sometimes use individual names. The reins communicate pressure, but voice and familiarity matter too. A good team responds to a driver it knows. This becomes particularly valuable at night. You may see almost nothing from inside the coach, but the driver is reading movement, sound, and feel constantly. The horse's pace tells him something. The pull through the lines tells him something. The road beneath the wheels tells him something. A change that means nothing to you may immediately tell him that one animal is stumbling, or that the surface ahead has changed. And unlike you, he cannot fall asleep. That is perhaps the most unfair detail of all. You can nod off against a stranger's shoulder. You can close your eyes between ruts. You can disappear beneath the robe and let someone else worry about where the road is. The driver has to stay alert, hour after hour, through cold, darkness, snow, and every fresh problem the road invents. You hear him call quietly to the horses again as the coach moves forward. For the first time tonight, you stop wondering why he seems so serious. He is not simply driving the stage. He is the navigation system, traction control, weather monitor, animal manager, brake operator, and emergency response department. You are contributing by remaining seated. It is good that responsibilities have been clearly divided. 27. Every creek crossing becomes an event. The route north is broken by rivers, creeks, gullies, and low ground, and every one of them has the potential to turn an ordinary stretch of travel into a small engineering problem. In modern life, you cross water without thinking about it. A bridge appears, the road continues, and unless traffic is terrible, the entire event occupies perhaps 12 seconds of your attention. In 1881, a winter creek crossing deserves considerably more respect. The driver begins preparing before you even understand what is happening. The team slows, the coach settles into a gentler roll, and conversation inside quiets because everyone can feel the change in pace. You lift the edge of the curtain and see the road dipping ahead toward a dark strip in the landscape. Snow lies along the banks, and the track descends toward whatever bridge, ford, or frozen crossing the route provides. The first problem is the approach. A loaded stagecoach carries passengers, luggage, mail, and its own considerable weight. And all of that must travel downhill without deciding to arrive before the horses do. The driver uses the brake carefully, controlling the coach as the team descends. If the road is icy, the task becomes even more delicate, because wheels and hooves can both lose traction. Inside, everyone instinctively braces. You place one boot firmly against the floor and press a shoulder into the side of the coach. The passenger opposite does the same. Nobody has discussed this. Several hours on the road have simply taught all of you that when the vehicle begins leaning downhill, gravity is about to request participation. The coach tips forward. Your knees move closer to the passenger opposite. A bag shifts under the seat. The buffalo robe slides several inches and is immediately rescued by 3 hands. Then you hear water. Perhaps the crossing is bridged. Perhaps the road passes through a shallow ford. Conditions vary enormously from place to place, and winter adds its own complications. Ice may form along the edges of streams while moving water remains open farther out. A bridge can be safer than a ford, but frontier bridges are not modern concrete structures designed for decades of heavy traffic. Timber can rot, flood damage can weaken supports, and snow can hide surfaces the driver would rather inspect. You suddenly become extremely interested in the sound of every board beneath the wheels. The coach moves onto the crossing. Wood knocks beneath the iron tires. One wheel produces a hollow thump. You stop breathing for no useful reason. Nothing happens. The horses continue. The driver keeps the team steady because stopping halfway would improve absolutely nothing. If there is no bridge and the route uses a ford, the calculation changes again. Water depth matters, current matters, ice matters. The condition of the bottom matters because a wheel sinking into mud halfway across can turn a simple crossing into a lengthy and very cold discussion. The driver has likely crossed this water many times, but familiarity does not make it identical each day. Weather changes roads, snowmelt changes streams, ice changes footing. A crossing that was easy yesterday can become awkward tonight because nature has not signed the stage company's timetable. Eventually, the front of the coach begins rising. You have reached the opposite bank. This sounds like the easy part until you remember that the horses must now pull the entire loaded vehicle uphill. Harness tightens. The team's pace slows. You can hear the effort in their hooves and breathing. The driver encourages them steadily while the coach climbs behind. Everyone inside leans slightly forward as though this contributes something. It does not. You do it anyway. For several seconds, the stage seems to move at the speed of geological change. Then the horses gain firmer ground, the slope eases, and the coach rolls back onto the road. Everyone relaxes. No applause occurs because this was technically routine. That is the remarkable part. A crossing that has just required careful braking, experienced horses, practiced driving, and several passengers silently reconsidering their life choices is simply one more piece of the route. There will be another one later, perhaps several. You settle back against the wall while the road levels out. Behind you, the creek disappears into darkness. Ahead, the coach picks up speed again. In 1881, even a small stream can demand a full meeting. 28. Somewhere in the darkness, you remember the robbers. You had almost forgotten about stagecoach robbery. This is understandable because you have had several more immediate concerns. Your feet have been cold, your back has been rearranged by the road, you have eaten supper at a station with no menu, and you have spent part of the night asleep against a man whose surname you may never have learned. There has simply not been enough mental space left over for armed robbery. Then the coach slows unexpectedly somewhere in the darkness, and suddenly every story you have ever heard about road agents returns at once. The horses drop to a slower pace, the wheels soften over the snow, someone inside the coach lifts their head, and for several seconds nobody says anything. You listen for the driver's voice. You listen for another voice answering him. You listen for anything that might explain why you are no longer moving at the speed you were a moment ago. Nothing happens. This is exactly the sort of silence that allows imagination to become extremely productive. Stagecoach robbery is a real risk in the American West, particularly on routes carrying valuable express shipments, money, payrolls, or gold. Coaches travelling to and from mining districts attract attention because the same roads that move passengers and mail can also move wealth. A robber does not need to know whether every coach contains treasure. He only needs to believe that one of them might. Your coach is carrying mail, luggage, express freight, and passengers who may or may not have money tucked beneath several layers of winter clothing. You suddenly become aware of where your own valuables are. This is not reassuring. You also become aware that some of your fellow passengers may be armed. Carrying a revolver in the West is hardly remarkable, particularly for men travelling through remote country. Whether this makes you safer depends heavily on what happens next. Several nervous strangers producing firearms inside a crowded wooden compartment is not necessarily the comforting development modern imagination suggests. You quietly hope everyone remains sensible. The coach continues slowing. A passenger near the door looks toward the curtain but does not raise it. Nobody wants to be the first person to stick his face outside and discover that the reason for stopping has a gun. Popular stories will later turn stage robberies into wonderfully theatrical events involving masked men, dramatic commands, heroic passengers, and conveniently clear moonlight. The real version can be much uglier and much faster. Road agents may choose isolated stretches where escape is easy and help is unlikely. A driver faced with armed men has good reason to cooperate, rather than risk the lives of everyone aboard over property that belongs largely to somebody else. Express companies understand the danger too. Valuable shipments may travel in locked strongboxes, and particularly important runs can employ armed guards or shotgun messengers. The famous image of the guard sitting beside the driver with a shotgun is rooted in real practice, although not every coach has one. You glance upward as though you might somehow determine through the roof whether tonight's driver has brought extra protection. The roof provides no information. Then you hear the driver call to the horses. The coach moves forward again. Several passengers relax at exactly the same time. Apparently the slowdown was nothing more sinister than difficult road. Nobody admits to having worried. This is important. A gentleman does not announce that he has spent the last 30 seconds imagining himself being relieved of his money in a snowbank. You all return to your previous positions with remarkable dignity. Still, the thought remains. Every isolated bend now looks slightly more suspicious, although you cannot actually see any of them. Every unexpected stop deserves investigation. Every distant voice makes someone listen more carefully. Then exhaustion begins winning again. That is the extraordinary part. Even fear has trouble competing with several days of bad sleep. You pull the robe higher, settle against the wall, and close your eyes. If road agents appear, presumably someone will wake you. Until then, you have more urgent frontier business. You are trying to sleep through another pothole. 29. The coldest hours arrive just before morning. By the small hours, the night seems endless. You have lost any reliable sense of time, partly because there is no clock glowing beside your face and partly because every hour inside the coach now feels approximately 3 hours long. The passengers have stopped asking how far remains to the next station. Conversation has almost completely disappeared. Everyone is wrapped inside coats, blankets, scarves, and whatever private arrangement with discomfort they have managed to negotiate. Outside, the road continues through darkness, and the cold has become sharper than it was earlier in the evening. This is the part of the night when the warmth stored in your clothing has been gradually spent. Supper feels like something that happened to another person. The brief comfort of the stove at the road ranch has vanished. Your coffee is now mainly remembered as the reason you had to walk across a frozen yard to find the privy. The robe still helps, but even that no longer feels properly warm. It simply slows down the process of becoming colder. You pull it higher across your legs and tuck the edge around your boots as far as the other passengers will permit. Nobody objects much anymore. The complicated territorial negotiations of earlier have ended because everyone now understands that survival is easier when the blanket remains somewhere near the people underneath it. The floor feels especially cold. Your boots have been exposed to it for hours, and although you have stamped your feet at stations and flexed your toes inside your socks, warmth never lasts very long. You test them again by wiggling your toes. They respond, which feels encouraging enough to count as excellent news. The wooden wall beside you has become almost painfully cold to touch. You keep part of your coat between your shoulder and the panelling, not because it makes the wall warm, but because it prevents the cold from reaching you quite so directly. Every small gap around the curtain seems to have developed a special ability to locate exposed skin. A narrow draft touches your cheek. You shift your scarf higher. The draft moves toward your ear. You have stopped taking this personally. Outside, the horses keep working through the dark. Their breathing rises in pale clouds whenever the coach passes through enough moonlight for you to see them. The driver's job becomes increasingly difficult as fatigue, weather, and cold all begin working together. He cannot simply close his eyes for 10 minutes. He cannot lean against somebody else's shoulder. He has to keep watching the road, reading the team, and remaining alert while the passengers beneath him quietly become a collection of sleeping coats. Inside, exhaustion competes with temperature. You are tired enough to sleep almost anywhere now, but every time you finally settle, cold finds another reason to wake you. Perhaps your foot slips out from beneath the robe. Perhaps the curtain moves and a draft crosses your face. Perhaps the coach slows and the reduced movement makes the compartment feel suddenly colder. You wake, adjust everything, and drift off again. There is something strange about these hours. They are miserable, certainly, but they are also quieter than anything you have experienced during the journey. Nobody is performing conversation anymore. Nobody is pretending the ride is exciting. Nobody is making plans for Deadwood. Everyone is simply enduring. The coach rocks steadily through the darkness. Hooves strike the road. Leather creaks beneath you. Snow or frost softens the landscape outside until there is almost nothing left to see. You exist inside a small, moving pocket of human warmth surrounded by miles of winter. You begin to understand why dawn matters so much to travellers. It is not merely light. It is proof that the night has an ending. Eventually, the black outside the curtain begins changing almost imperceptibly. At first you think you are imagining it, but then the darkness becomes grey rather than black. The horizon develops a faint shape. Snow beside the road begins reflecting a little more light. Morning is coming. It is not warm yet. In fact, the cold still feels vicious. But now you can see it. For reasons that are almost entirely psychological, this helps enormously. You pull the robe tighter and close your eyes for one final fragment of sleep. The night has not become kinder. It has simply started running out of time. 30. Dawn reveals what the night has done to everyone. Eventually a thin grey light finds its way around the curtains. At first, nobody reacts. The coach has been moving through darkness for so long that the change is almost too small to notice. Then the blackness beside the window turns blue-grey. The outlines of the passengers become visible again. And one by one the compartment begins to reveal what several hours of winter stage travel have done to everyone inside it. The results are not elegant. The man beside you wakes with his head still resting against your shoulder and takes several seconds to understand why. He straightens slowly, rubs his neck, and adjusts his hat as though the night has not happened. You do the same. There is no discussion of the sleeping arrangement because daylight has restored social rules, and both of you appear willing to pretend that you did not spend several hours functioning as mutual bedding. Across from you, another passenger has a crease running across one cheek where his collar pressed into his face. His hair has escaped whatever arrangement it began the journey in, and his coat is twisted strangely around one shoulder. Someone farther along the bench is searching beneath the seats for a missing glove. The glove is eventually found beneath a carpet bag. Nobody knows how it got there. Your own body feels as though it has been stored incorrectly. You straighten your back and immediately regret the speed at which you attempted it. Muscles that spent the night holding you upright in unnatural positions begin reporting for duty again. Your shoulders ache. Your knees are stiff. One hip has developed a deep personal grievance. Your neck feels as though it belongs to someone considerably older and less fortunate. You stretch as much as the crowded coach allows, which is not much. Everyone else begins doing the same thing. The compartment fills with careful shifts, quiet groans, rubbing hands, rolling shoulders, and the slow rediscovery of limbs. Nobody complains loudly because everybody is suffering approximately the same problem, and there is something impolite about announcing that your back hurts to 8 people whose backs also hurt. The buffalo robe is lifted and rearranged, revealing boots that have spent most of the night pressed together beneath it. Several passengers stamp their feet lightly against the floor. Cold toes begin tingling as circulation improves. This is good news delivered unpleasantly. The interior itself looks different in daylight. During the night, darkness softened everything. Now you can see the damp wool, rumpled blankets, scuffed boots, luggage wedged beneath seats, and condensation that has gathered around colder surfaces. The coach looks smaller than it did yesterday. This seems impossible. Yet morning has somehow removed another foot of available space. You lift the curtains slightly and look outside. The landscape has returned. Snow lies across the plains in pale stretches, broken by tracks, grass, fences, and whatever landmarks the driver has been following through the night. The sky is washed in cold grey light, and the horses ahead are visible again, their backs moving rhythmically as they pull. After hours of seeing almost nothing, the ordinary sight of land feels reassuring. You can finally see where you are going. You cannot see Deadwood. That would be asking far too much. The driver is still above you, and the sight of him produces a new respect. While you spent portions of the night asleep on strangers, he remained outside, exposed to wind and snow, guiding the team through darkness. He looks exactly like a man who has been awake all night, because that is essentially what has happened. The passengers, meanwhile, begin returning to polite society. Hats are straightened, scarves are adjusted, coats are brushed, people recover bags and check pockets. A woman smooths her skirt. A man rubs at his face with both hands and attempts to make himself look like someone who slept intentionally. Nobody succeeds. Then someone mentions breakfast. The effect is immediate. Faces lift. Attention returns. Somewhere ahead, there is another station, a stove, hot coffee, food, and perhaps a chair that will remain completely still while you sit on it. Suddenly, the morning looks much brighter. You glance around the coach one more time at the exhausted, rumpled collection of strangers who left Sydney looking like respectable travellers. The night has removed the respectability. What remains is considerably more honest. 9 tired people, several missing buttons, 1 recovered glove, and a shared understanding that everyone would now commit minor crimes for hot coffee. 31. Breakfast tastes better when you have survived the night. Soon the stage approaches another substantial station. You know something is different before you can properly see the buildings because the horses begin to change pace and the passengers around you become more alert. After the long grey hours before dawn, even the possibility of stopping feels important. Then smoke appears ahead, curling from a chimney into the pale morning air, and somebody quietly mentions breakfast. That one word improves everyone. You had not realised how hungry you were because most of the night has been spent thinking about cold feet, stiff knees, rough roads, and whether your neck will ever forgive you. Now that food is within reach, hunger arrives all at once. Your stomach seems to remember that supper happened many hours ago and immediately files a complaint. The coach rolls into the station yard and the buildings slowly come into view. There is a stable, a low main building, perhaps a few smaller structures, and enough smoke rising from the chimney to suggest that somewhere inside, a stove is doing useful work. The horses are steaming in the morning cold, their harness creaking softly as they come to a stop. The door opens. Nobody needs encouragement. You climb down and stand upright with the solemn pleasure of someone being released from a piece of furniture. Your knees straighten slowly, your back extends, your boots hit solid ground. The cold air is sharp, but after the close atmosphere of the coach, it feels clean and almost refreshing. Then you smell coffee. This becomes the most important event of the morning. Inside the station, warmth hits you first. Then comes the smell of wood smoke, cooked meat, bread, coffee, and whatever else has been prepared for travellers. The room is plain, practical, and perhaps rough around the edges, but right now it feels better than any hotel dining room you have ever seen. You sit in a chair. The chair does not sway. You remain deeply impressed by this. Breakfast at a larger stage station might include eggs if they are available, bacon or other meat, bread, biscuits, potatoes, beans, or whatever the kitchen can reliably produce. There may be butter, perhaps preserves, and certainly coffee if the station has any sense of what exhausted travellers are prepared to pay for. You are not concerned with presentation. Nothing needs parsley. Nothing needs to arrive on a warmed plate. You simply want it hot. The coffee is poured, and you wrap your hands around the cup before drinking. The heat works into your fingers. Steam rises into your face. The coffee itself may be strong, dark, and boiled with far more confidence than precision, but after a winter night in the coach it tastes extraordinary. You take a long drink. For several seconds, you genuinely forgive the entire 19th century. The food arrives, and you begin eating with far more enthusiasm than dignity. Bread that might have seemed ordinary yesterday now tastes excellent. Bacon seems almost ceremonial. Potatoes possess emotional depth. Even beans, if they appear, are welcomed with respect. Hunger is a powerful food critic. Around you, the other passengers are undergoing the same transformation. The silent, exhausted people from the coach become conversational again. Someone asks the driver how far the next station is. Another passenger wants to know whether the snow gets worse farther north. A station worker gives an answer that is not especially encouraging, and everyone continues eating anyway. The driver eats quickly if he has time because his morning is not becoming easier simply because daylight has arrived. Fresh horses must be ready, harness checked, road conditions considered, and the schedule maintained as well as weather allows. You, meanwhile, are taking your time with a second cup of coffee. This is a mistake. You know it is a mistake. You also make it willingly. After the night you have just survived, consequences belong to the future. For now, you are warm, seated, fed, and holding a hot cup while sunlight slowly strengthens outside the window. Then someone announces that the team is nearly ready. Of course it is. You look down at your plate and feel the familiar sadness of stage travel. Every good thing seems to occur immediately before someone tells you to put your coat back on. You finish the coffee, stand, and pull on your gloves. Outside, the coach is waiting. Breakfast has restored your strength. Unfortunately, the stage company intends to use it. 32. And Deadwood is still several days away. And here is the final joke of your first winter night on the stagecoach. You have made it through darkness. You have slept in fragments, shared warmth with strangers, lost sensation in your feet, crossed rough country, watched horses changed beneath lantern light, eaten at roadside stations, and learned that the human spine can survive things it should probably not be encouraged to attempt. Morning has arrived, which creates the comforting impression that you are nearly finished. You are not. Deadwood is still several days away. This is the moment when your modern sense of distance becomes actively unhelpful. You have survived one full night of travel, so some part of your brain naturally assumes that the difficult portion must now be behind you. Surely there cannot be another night like that. Surely the journey now becomes a gentle daytime ride toward a warm hotel, perhaps with mountains appearing beautifully on the horizon, and someone eventually handing you a key. Instead, the driver is already preparing to leave again. The fresh team stands outside the station, harnessed and ready. Your luggage remains tied to the coach. The mail has survived the night with greater dignity than you have. The other passengers are finishing breakfast, straightening clothing, adjusting hats, and slowly accepting that the coach waiting in the yard is not a historical exhibit. It is still your transportation. The Sydney to Deadwood route is roughly 275 miles, and under good conditions a stage journey can take around 4 days. Winter has the ability to make those numbers less dependable. Snow slows the team. Difficult crossings consume time. A stuck coach consumes more. Weather can turn an ordinary stretch of road into an entire afternoon. This means the night you have just endured is not the grand climax of the adventure. It is Tuesday. You pull on your coat and feel several parts of your body object immediately. The muscles across your shoulders have stiffened. Your knees seem suspicious of bending again. One hip has become aware that you intend to return it to the exact seat responsible for its current condition. You ignore all of these warnings because there is no alternative that ends in Deadwood. Outside, daylight has changed the landscape. The snow looks less threatening beneath a pale winter sky. You can see the road again, or at least the collection of tracks currently serving as one. The open plains stretch northward, and somewhere beyond them the country will begin changing as you approach the Black Hills. That distant landscape gives you something to aim toward. It does not make the seat softer. You climb aboard. Everyone fits themselves back into yesterday's arrangement with depressing efficiency. There is no longer much discussion about who sits where. You know your corner. The man opposite knows where his knees belong. The robe is spread across laps. Bags are returned beneath seats. A passenger gives a small sigh as the door closes. This is what experience looks like after one night. You are no longer beginners. You are merely uncomfortable professionals. The driver gathers the reins, and the fresh horses begin moving. The station slips behind you. Within minutes, the wheels are rattling over frozen ground again, and the familiar sway of the thoroughbraces returns beneath your body. Oddly, it bothers you less. Nothing has improved. You know what the sounds mean now. You know how to lean with the coach. You know that the cold will become worse after sunset, that relay stops will feel too short, and that hot coffee at the next larger station will seem like a religious experience. You also know that you can survive it. That may be the great trick of 19th century travel. Comfort is not promised, speed is relative, and schedules are optimistic documents. But people keep moving because the alternative is not moving at all. So you settle against the wall and look through the curtain at the winter road ahead. Deadwood remains hundreds of miles away. There will be more snow, more stations, more stiff mornings, and more nights in which you attempt to sleep sitting upright beside people who are rapidly becoming familiar enough to use as furniture. But for the first time, that distance feels manageable. You survived the first night. Now all you have to do is do it again, several times.